Tonight, let us settle into a quieter chapter of the past. I invite you to imagine the world slowing down, almost as if it is holding its breath. The streets are still. Shop windows reflect more shadow than light. Radios hum softly in living rooms where families sit close together, listening not just for music or news, but for reassurance. This is the beginning of our story tonight, the long, hushed era we now call the Great Depression. As your guide, I will walk with you gently through these years. Not with urgency, and not with sharp edges, but with care and steadiness. History, after all, is not only made of dates and numbers. It is made of ordinary mornings, quiet worries, shared meals, and the way people learned to endure when certainty slipped away. The Great Depression did not arrive all at once. It crept in, slowly and unevenly, like a fog rolling across farmland and city streets alike. At first, many believed it would pass quickly. A downturn, a pause, a temporary chill. But as weeks became months, and months turned into years, the stillness deepened. Factories closed their doors. Banks locked their windows. Fields went dry beneath relentless skies. Tonight, we will not rush through these events. We will take our time. We will listen to the soft echoes of footsteps on breadlines, to the low murmur of hope and frustration mixed together. We will notice the small details that history books often hurry past. The careful mending of clothes. The way a single candle might light a whole room. The strength found in routine, even when the future felt uncertain. I want you to feel safe here as we explore this story. There will be no sudden turns. No sharp noises. Only the steady rhythm of a world learning how to endure hardship together. Even in these difficult years, there was kindness. There was creativity. There was resilience, carried quietly from one day to the next. As we move forward, you may begin to sense how deeply this era shaped the people who lived through it. Their habits, their fears, their values. Many who survived these years carried its lessons for the rest of their lives, saving scraps of string, turning off lights, trusting slowly, and holding gratitude close. For now, allow your breathing to soften as well. Let the weight of the day ease from your shoulders. You are not being asked to solve anything tonight. Only to listen, to drift, and to let history unfold at a calm and measured pace. In the stillness that follows this introduction, we will begin part 1. There, we will step back into the years just before everything changed, when optimism still lingered in the air, and few could imagine how deeply the world was about to be transformed. For now, rest here with me, in the quiet before the story truly begins. Part 1. Before the Fall. Let us drift back to a time just before the world seemed to tilt. It is the late 1920s, and for many, life feels full of motion and promise. Cities hum with activity. Streetcars glide along their tracks. Shop windows gleam beneath electric lights that feel modern, almost magical. Radios sit proudly in living rooms, their wooden cabinets polished and cared for, carrying voices and music across miles of invisible air. The future, to many, feels close and bright. In these years, especially in the United States, there is a widespread belief that progress is inevitable. Industry is booming. Factories stretch outward, their brick walls warm in the sun, their smokestacks steady and reliable. Automobiles roll off assembly lines at astonishing speed, filling streets that were once quieter, slower places. A car is no longer a distant dream but something a family might realistically save for, something that represents freedom and movement. People speak often of opportunity, of growth, of prosperity that seems endless. On farms, the land still bears the marks of recent war and earlier hardship, but there is hope here too. Tractors replace horses in many fields. Mechanization promises efficiency, larger harvests, better lives. The soil, when treated kindly, still yields wheat, corn, and cotton in familiar rhythms. Mornings begin with dew on the grass and the steady routines of chores. Even when money is tight, there is food pulled from the earth, and that brings a sense of reassurance. In towns and cities, money flows more freely than it ever has before. Banks extend credit with confidence. Installment plans allow families to buy radios, furniture, appliances, paying a little at a time. Advertisements fill newspapers and magazines, painted with smiling faces and easy optimism. The message is clear and repeated often. Tomorrow will be better than today. The stock market, once a distant concern for the wealthy, begins to attract everyday citizens. Clerks, teachers, shopkeepers, and factory workers listen closely to stories of sudden gains. Friends share tips over lunch. Neighbors talk about rising prices and easy profits. There is a sense that wealth is no longer reserved for a select few. It feels accessible, almost democratic. The numbers keep climbing, and with them, confidence swells. There is little talk of limits. Yet beneath this surface of energy and excitement, quieter currents move. They are not obvious at first. They do not announce themselves loudly. They exist in small imbalances, in uneven foundations that few pause to examine closely. Wages, for many workers, do not rise as quickly as profits. Productivity increases, but the rewards are not evenly shared. Some households feel prosperous, while others quietly struggle to keep up with payments. Farmers, in particular, face falling crop prices due to overproduction. Silos fill, but income shrinks. Debt accumulates slowly, like dust settling in corners no one checks often. Banks, eager to lend, sometimes take risks they do not fully understand. Investments grow increasingly speculative. Loans are extended on optimism rather than careful assessment. Paper wealth multiplies, but the underlying economy does not always match its pace. Still, these concerns remain distant to most people. Life goes on in ordinary ways. Children walk to school with lunch pails swinging at their sides. Housewives plan meals carefully, stretching ingredients but still finding moments of pride in a well-set table. Men put on their hats each morning and head to work, confident that tomorrow will resemble today. Evenings bring small comforts. A family gathers around the radio, listening to music or comedy shows that make them laugh. There is relief in shared sound, in knowing others are listening too. On porches, neighbors chat as the sun dips low, fireflies beginning to glow in the grass. The air smells of cut wood, coal smoke, or summer dust, depending on the season. It is easy, in moments like these, to believe in permanence. The world has known hardship before, of course. Older generations remember panics and recessions, times when money tightened and work grew scarce. But those memories feel softened now, dulled by years of relative stability. Many believe such struggles belong to the past, relics of a less advanced age. Progress, after all, feels unstoppable. And yet, as the decade draws toward its close, subtle signs begin to appear. Stock prices rise faster than corporate earnings can justify. Borrowed money fuels speculation. The system stretches, thin in places, though it does not tear all at once. In the background, a quiet imbalance grows. When the market begins to wobble, at first it seems insignificant. A dip here. A nervous headline there. People reassure one another. Corrections are normal, they say. Healthy, even. The language of confidence remains intact. But the wobble does not settle. Instead, it deepens. In October of 1929, the rhythm breaks. Panic enters the air, sharp and sudden. Phones ring. Trading floors grow loud and frantic. Numbers that once climbed so reliably now fall, faster than anyone expects. Fortunes evaporate in hours. Savings vanish. The invisible scaffolding of confidence collapses under its own weight. For those watching from outside the financial centers, the impact is not immediate. Life does not stop overnight. But something shifts, quietly and irrevocably. Banks grow cautious. Credit tightens. Businesses slow production. Layoffs begin, at first sporadically, then in waves. A man comes home earlier than usual, his lunch untouched. A factory whistle does not sound one morning. A familiar storefront closes its doors, paper taped inside the window. These small disruptions ripple outward, touching families, neighborhoods, entire communities. Confusion settles in before fear. People ask questions without clear answers. Is this temporary? Will things return to normal by spring? By summer? They look to leaders, to newspapers, to one another. Reassurances are offered, but they feel thinner now, less certain. At kitchen tables, conversations grow quieter. Budgets are reconsidered. Purchases postponed. Savings guarded closely. Some families begin to plant gardens, even in city lots, just in case. Others take in sewing or mending work, turning skill into a few extra coins. Still, many cling to hope. They believe, earnestly, that the system will correct itself, that the world they knew only months earlier will soon return. It feels impossible that prosperity could vanish so completely, so quickly. As winter approaches, the chill carries more than cold. It carries unease. Fires burn low in some homes as coal and wood are rationed carefully. Coats are worn longer, patched rather than replaced. The radio continues to speak, but its tone changes, more serious now, more measured. The Great Depression has not yet revealed its full shape. In this moment, it is still an unfolding uncertainty, a shadow lengthening slowly across daily life. People do not yet know how long it will last, or how deeply it will cut. They only know that something familiar has slipped away, and something unknown has taken its place. And so we pause here, in this fragile space between confidence and collapse. The world has not stopped turning, but it no longer feels steady beneath one's feet. As we move gently onward into the next part, we will follow how this uncertainty spreads, how unemployment rises, how communities adapt, and how ordinary people learn to live within shrinking margins. For now, let this moment rest. The quiet before the storm has passed, and the long years ahead are beginning to take form, slowly, patiently, one day at a time. Part 2. The long quiet begins. As the months move forward, the world grows quieter in ways that are difficult to describe all at once. At first, the changes feel subtle. A factory shortens its hours. A shopkeeper closes a little earlier in the evening, turning the key with care, listening to the echo of the lock. Trains still run, but some cars sit empty, their benches polished but unused. The rhythm of daily life continues, yet it carries a new hesitancy, as though everyone is walking a little more softly than before. By 1930, the uncertainty that followed the market collapse has settled into something heavier. Businesses that once promised stability begin to falter. Orders slow. Warehouses fill with goods that no one can afford to buy. Employers face decisions they hoped never to make. One by one, names are crossed off payroll lists. Men are called into offices, spoken to gently, sometimes awkwardly, and sent home with apologies that offer little comfort. Unemployment rises, quietly at first, then steadily. For those who lose their jobs, the days stretch long and unfamiliar. Morning routines dissolve. There is no whistle to follow, no schedule to keep. Instead, there is time. Too much time. Hours are filled with walking, with scanning newspapers for listings that grow shorter each week, with standing in lines that wind slowly around buildings. Breadlines begin to appear in cities. They are not dramatic scenes at first. Just a few men waiting patiently outside churches or community kitchens, hats pulled low, hands tucked into pockets. Volunteers ladle soup into tin bowls, offering a warm meal and a kind word. Gratitude is spoken softly. Pride is swallowed carefully. As weeks turn into months, the lines grow longer. Families feel the pressure in different ways. In some homes, savings cushion the early blow. Money is drawn from accounts meant for emergencies, and this surely qualifies. But savings are finite. They shrink with each grocery trip, each bill paid reluctantly, each unexpected expense. In other homes, there were never savings to begin with. Women stretch meals with creativity and care. Stews grow thinner. Meat becomes rare. Beans, bread, and potatoes take center stage. Recipes are shared between neighbors, whispered like small secrets of survival. Clothing is mended again and again, patches layered over patches, fabric growing soft with use. Children notice the changes even when adults try to hide them. They sense the tension in hushed conversations, in the way parents linger over ledgers and envelopes at the kitchen table. Some children leave school early to help, taking odd jobs, shining shoes, running errands, anything that might bring in a few coins. On farms, the situation grows equally grim. Crop prices fall further, sometimes below the cost of production. Fields still demand work, but the reward feels increasingly distant. Farmers haul produce to market only to return with less than they hoped, sometimes less than they need. Debt presses in from all sides. Mortgages loom. Foreclosure notices arrive folded and official, their language cold and final. The land itself seems to grow weary. Years of intensive farming have left soil fragile. In the Great Plains, winds begin to strip fields bare, lifting dry earth into the air. Dust settles on fences, on window sills, on dinner plates. It creeps into lungs and eyes, turning days dim and brown. The horizon disappears behind moving walls of dirt, and the sky loses its blue. Yet even as conditions worsen, there is a remarkable stillness in how people endure. Neighbors help neighbors. Families double up in houses, sharing space and heat. Churches open their doors not just for worship but for meals, for meetings, for quiet moments of reassurance. Local governments attempt relief programs, though funds are limited and needs are vast. The soundscape of daily life changes. Radios speak more often of hardship. News reports describe bank failures, each one a small disaster for a community. When a bank closes, it does not simply lock its doors. It takes with it the savings of families, the capital of businesses, the sense of trust that underpins everything else. People begin to hoard cash, hiding it in jars, under mattresses, inside books. Money becomes something to guard rather than circulate. This instinct, while understandable, slows the economy further, tightening the grip of the downturn. In cities, visible signs of poverty grow harder to ignore. Shanty towns appear on vacant land, constructed from scrap wood, tar paper, and discarded materials. These settlements take on nicknames spoken half in bitterness, half in weary humor. Fires flicker inside makeshift shelters, offering warmth and a fragile sense of home. Despite the hardship, there are moments of humanity that persist. A stranger shares a cigarette. Someone offers directions to a relief office. A musician plays on a street corner, the notes drifting softly through cold air, reminding passers-by of better days. Laughter still surfaces occasionally, surprising and brief, but genuine. Psychologically, the weight of the depression presses deeply. Men who once defined themselves by their work struggle with feelings of shame and uselessness. Women carry emotional burdens quietly, trying to maintain stability for their families. Anxiety becomes a constant companion, an undercurrent that hums even in moments of rest. Sleep grows lighter. Dreams are restless. The government, at this stage, moves cautiously. Leaders hope the economy will recover on its own, as it has after previous downturns. Public statements emphasize patience and confidence. But for those living the reality of unemployment and hunger, words feel insufficient. Winter arrives, and with it, new challenges. Cold magnifies hardship. Heating fuel becomes precious. Some families gather in a single room to conserve warmth, coats worn indoors, blankets layered thickly at night. The sound of wind against walls feels louder now, more insistent. Yet even here, there is resilience. People find ways to adapt. Skills once considered hobbies become lifelines. Sewing, carpentry, cooking, repairing. Anything that can be traded, sold, or shared becomes valuable. Communities organize dances, potlucks, simple gatherings that cost little but offer much-needed connection. By the end of 1930, it is clear that this is not a short-lived crisis. The phrase of the Depression enters common speech, spoken with a mix of dread and resignation. There is an unspoken understanding that life, for now, will be smaller, tighter, more cautious. Still, there is a quiet determination to endure. Each morning, people rise and face the day as best they can. They line up. They work when work is available. They care for children. They tend gardens. They hold on to dignity in whatever ways remain within reach. As we prepare to move into the next part, the foundation has shifted. The early shock has given way to a prolonged struggle. The question is no longer whether things will change quickly, but how people will survive if they do not. For now, rest in this moment of collective endurance. The world has grown quieter, but it has not gone silent. In the hush, lives continue, adapting slowly, patiently, as the long years of the Great Depression unfold one day at a time. Part 3. Life on shrinking ground. As the early years of the Depression stretch onward, hardship settles into daily life with a kind of weary permanence. What once felt like a temporary disruption now reshapes routines, expectations, and identities. People no longer speak as often about when things will return to normal. Instead, they ask quieter questions. How can we make this last? What can be done with less? In cities, unemployment becomes a defining feature of the landscape. Men gather in parks, on street corners, outside employment offices, waiting for notices that rarely come. Their conversations are subdued. They share rumors of jobs that might appear tomorrow, of factories rumored to be reopening, of construction projects whispered about with cautious hope. Often, these leads dissolve before they can be acted upon. Days are structured around necessity rather than ambition. Mornings may begin with a walk to a relief office. Afternoons are spent searching, waiting, or returning home empty-handed. Evenings settle in early, marked by dim lights and quiet meals. Without the distraction of steady work, time moves differently. Hours stretch. Weeks blur together. For families, the strain becomes deeply personal. Children outgrow shoes that cannot be replaced. School attendance declines as teenagers seek work to support their households. Some children are sent to live with relatives who are slightly better off, creating separations that are practical but painful. Letters travel back and forth, filled with reassurances and longing. In many homes, pride becomes both a shield and a burden. Accepting help is difficult. Relief programs, though increasingly necessary, carry social stigma. People line up with eyes downcast, grateful but uncomfortable. Volunteers do their best to offer dignity alongside assistance, but the imbalance remains. Women often become the quiet anchors of survival. They manage households with remarkable ingenuity, finding ways to stretch limited resources. Old recipes are revived. New ones are invented. A single chicken feeds a family for days through soups, broths, and careful reuse. Gardens become essential, not decorative. Every scrap is saved. Nothing is wasted without thought. Men, meanwhile, grapple with a loss that is not always visible. In a society where work is closely tied to identity, unemployment erodes self-worth. Some retreat into silence. Others grow restless. Tension rises in cramped living spaces, and arguments flare more easily under constant stress. Yet many men also adapt, taking on tasks once considered outside their role, helping at home, caring for children, learning new trades where possible. On the road, a new population emerges. Men and women leave home in search of opportunity, riding freight trains, hitchhiking along highways, carrying their belongings in small bundles. They move from town to town, guided by word of mouth and faint hope. Some find temporary work. Many do not. Nights are spent in camps, under bridges, in fields. These travelers form loose communities, sharing food, stories, and warnings. Their lives are uncertain, but not without structure. Unwritten rules govern camps. Fires are shared. Theft is discouraged. A sense of mutual respect develops among those who understand hardship intimately. Songs are sung softly in the evenings. Stories of past lives are told, not to boast, but to remember who they once were. In rural areas, the depression intertwines with environmental disaster. Drought tightens its grip across large swaths of farmland. Crops fail. Wells dry up. The soil, already weakened by years of intensive farming, lifts easily into the air. Dust storms darken skies, blotting out the sun, turning midday into twilight. Homes are sealed as best they can be, but dust finds its way inside, coating furniture, bedding, lungs. Families in these regions face impossible choices. Stay and hope the land recovers, or leave everything behind in search of work elsewhere. For many, leaving becomes the only option. Cars are packed with possessions deemed essential. Everything else is abandoned. Roads fill with vehicles heading west, carrying dreams of stability and survival. These migrations reshape communities far beyond their origins. Towns swell suddenly, overwhelmed by newcomers seeking work that does not exist in sufficient quantity. Tensions arise. Resources stretch thin. Compassion competes with fear. Amid all of this, institutions struggle to respond. Charities expand their efforts, relying on donations that are increasingly scarce. Local governments attempt public works projects to provide employment, but funding limits their reach. The scale of need outpaces available solutions. Emotionally, the depression leaves deep marks. Anxiety becomes chronic. Depression, though not always named, is widespread. Some people withdraw. Others cling tightly to routine as a source of stability. Religious attendance increases in many places, offering comfort and community. Faith provides meaning when material security falters. Yet culture does not vanish. Music, film, and radio remain powerful forces. Cheap entertainment offers escape, if only briefly. People gather around radios to hear familiar voices, comedy programs, and serialized dramas. Laughter, when it comes, is precious. It feels like resistance. Movies provide visions of glamour and adventure far removed from daily reality. For the price of a ticket, audiences sit in darkened theaters and imagine different lives. These moments do not erase hardship, but they offer relief, a mental pause. Children continue to play, adapting games to their surroundings. Vacant lots become playgrounds. Imaginations flourish even in scarcity. There is resilience here, instinctive and hopeful. By the early 1930s, it is clear that the Depression is reshaping society in lasting ways. Attitudes toward money change. Saving becomes a moral imperative. Waste is viewed with suspicion. Trust in institutions weakens, replaced by caution and self-reliance. Still, beneath the weight of hardship, there remains a steady pulse of endurance. People rise each day not because they are confident, but because they must. They find meaning in small victories. A job secured for a week. A good harvest from a small garden. A letter from a loved one. A shared meal. As we prepare to move gently onward, this chapter leaves us with a picture of a world learning to live on shrinking ground. Resources are fewer. Certainty is rare. But life continues, shaped by adaptation, cooperation, and quiet strength. The next part will explore how governments and leaders respond more forcefully, and how new ideas begin to emerge from necessity. For now, rest in this moment of endurance. The road ahead is long, but it is not without movement, and not without hope carried quietly forward. Part 4. The weight of waiting. By the time the Depression settles into its fourth year, waiting becomes a way of life. Waiting for work. Waiting for relief checks. Waiting for weather to change, for prices to rise, for something, anything, to shift. The early urgency has faded into a slower, heavier rhythm. People no longer rush toward solutions with the same expectation of quick results. Instead, days are approached carefully, deliberately, measured by what can be endured rather than what can be achieved. In cities, unemployment reaches levels once thought unimaginable. Entire neighborhoods are shaped by absence. Absence of income. Absence of certainty. Absence of the daily movements that once gave life structure. Factories stand silent, their windows dusty, their gates locked. Inside, machines wait, frozen mid-purpose, as if they too are unsure when they will be needed again. Men who once walked confidently to work now spend their mornings scanning bulletin boards or lining up outside employment offices that offer little more than sympathetic glances. Conversations in these lines are subdued. There is less speculation now, fewer rumors of opportunity. Most have learned to temper hope, to keep it small and manageable. At home, the strain deepens. Savings are gone for many families. What remains is ingenuity and restraint. Every purchase is weighed carefully. Shoes are repaired until they can no longer be mended. Coats are passed down, altered, reused. Furniture is sold, piece by piece, until rooms feel hollow and echo slightly when walked through. Meals grow simpler still. Bread, beans, porridge. Coffee, once a daily comfort, becomes an occasional treat. Sugar is rationed carefully. Meat is rare. Yet even here, meals are shared deliberately, often eaten together in silence that feels both heavy and intimate. Children sense the permanence of the situation now. The early confusion has given way to understanding. They recognize that this is not a brief interruption but a new normal. Some mature quickly, helping at home, caring for younger siblings, contributing however they can. Others retreat into imagination, finding escape in books, games, or daydreams. School classrooms thin as attendance drops. Teachers do what they can, often providing emotional support alongside lessons. Education continues, but its future feels uncertain to many families who wonder whether schooling can be afforded or justified when survival feels more urgent. On the road, the transient population grows. People move not out of adventure but necessity. Freight trains carry riders clinging to ladders and roofs, moving quietly, cautiously. There is danger here, but also determination. Each stop offers the possibility of work, even if only for a day. These travelers develop their own routines. Mornings begin with scouting for food or odd jobs. Evenings gather around fires, sharing stories that grow softer with repetition. There is camaraderie born of shared hardship. Names are remembered. Histories are respected. There is an unspoken understanding that everyone here has lost something. In rural areas, the land continues to struggle. Dust storms grow more frequent and more severe. They arrive without warning, turning daylight into darkness, forcing families to seal themselves indoors. Clothes are pressed against faces. Children are guided carefully through rooms as visibility drops to nothing. When the storms pass, they leave behind a fine layer of earth on everything, as if the land itself is trying to reclaim what was taken. Farming families face heartbreaking decisions. Livestock is sold at low prices or slaughtered because feed cannot be afforded. Fields are abandoned. Wells run dry. The connection between people and land, once a source of stability, becomes strained and fragile. Churches and community centers become lifelines. They offer not only food and clothing but a sense of continuity. Services are attended more frequently, not always out of religious conviction, but out of need for connection and reassurance. Singing together becomes a form of comfort, voices blending in ways that feel grounding. Local governments expand relief efforts where possible. Soup kitchens multiply. Public works projects are discussed, planned, sometimes begun. Roads are repaired. Parks are maintained. Small wages are paid. These efforts help, but they cannot meet the full scale of need. Emotionally, patience wears thin. The weight of waiting presses down. Anxiety becomes a constant background presence. People worry not only about themselves, but about the future their children will inherit. The idea of progress feels distant, almost abstract. Trust in institutions continues to erode. Banks are viewed with suspicion. Businesses with caution. Even optimism itself is approached carefully, as if it might disappear if held too tightly. Yet despite this erosion, something else quietly forms. People learn to rely on one another in deeper ways. Bartering becomes common. Skills are exchanged. A repaired roof for a basket of vegetables. Childcare traded for sewing. These arrangements are informal, flexible, rooted in mutual respect. Communities become smaller, more intimate. Neighbors know each other's struggles. Privacy gives way to shared understanding. There is less pretense, less performance. What remains is honest survival. Culture adapts as well. Music reflects longing and resilience. Songs tell stories of loss, of travel, of hope carried forward despite hardship. These melodies spread quickly, passed from voice to voice, carrying shared emotion. Radio remains a central presence. It brings news, but also connection. People gather around it not just for information, but for the sense that the wider world still exists, that others are listening too. By this point, the depression has altered expectations permanently. People no longer assume stability. They plan cautiously. They save whenever possible. They hold on to what they have with care. And still, each day begins anew. Morning light filters through thin curtains. Fires are lit. Coffee, if available, is brewed carefully. Children are woken. Adults step out into streets or fields or roads, carrying with them a quiet resolve. As we prepare to move into the next part, the theme of waiting remains central. The world feels suspended, caught between what was and what might be. Yet within this suspension, there is movement. Ideas are forming. Pressures are building. Change, though slow, is becoming inevitable. For now, rest in this heavy stillness. The waiting has weight, but it also creates space. In that space, the seeds of transformation are beginning, quietly, patiently, beneath the surface. Part 5. When the system breaks open. By the early 1930s, the depression no longer feels like a passing condition or even a prolonged hardship. It begins to feel structural, as though the very systems meant to support daily life have shifted out of alignment. What once functioned quietly in the background now demands attention, revealing cracks that can no longer be ignored. Banks sit at the center of this unraveling. For years, trust in banks had been nearly automatic. Savings were deposited with confidence. Loans were taken with the expectation of stability. But as the economy contracts, that trust erodes rapidly. Rumors spread quickly. A whisper that a bank may be in trouble is enough to send crowds rushing to withdraw their money. Lines form outside buildings before doors open, stretching down sidewalks in tense silence. Inside, tellers work carefully, aware that each withdrawal brings the institution closer to collapse. When a bank runs out of cash, the doors close, sometimes permanently. Families arrive too late, savings locked behind glass and paper signs. The loss is devastating. Money meant for rent, for food, for future security vanishes in an instant. These closures ripple outward. Businesses that relied on loans can no longer operate. Farmers lose access to credit needed for seed and equipment. Wages go unpaid. The collapse feeds itself, tightening the grip of the depression even further. Fear becomes contagious. People hide cash at home, removing it from circulation. While this feels like protection, it deepens the crisis. Without money moving through the economy, businesses cannot recover. The system stalls, weighed down by mutual mistrust. Meanwhile, deflation sets in. Prices fall, but not in a comforting way. Goods become cheaper, yet people cannot afford them because income has disappeared. The paradox is cruel. Store shelves remain stocked, but customers are few. Merchants lower prices again and again, watching profits evaporate. In factories, machinery sits idle. Skilled workers wait nearby, capable and willing, but without orders to fill. The disconnect feels almost surreal. There is labor, there are materials, there is need, yet the system fails to connect them. Across the country, foreclosures accelerate. Families are forced from homes they have lived in for years. Furniture is carried to curbs. Personal belongings are sold or abandoned. Evictions are often quiet affairs, marked by subdued conversations and careful movements, as if noise itself might make the loss sharper. Some communities push back. Neighbors gather to delay evictions, to protest foreclosures, to shame lenders into leniency. These efforts sometimes succeed, sometimes not. But they signal a growing awareness that individual suffering is tied to broader forces beyond personal control. In rural areas, farm foreclosures are especially painful. Land passed down through generations is lost. Auctions are held, often attended by the very families being displaced. There are moments when crowds bid only a few cents on property, returning it quietly to its original owners in acts of collective resistance. These gestures, though small, offer dignity amid loss. Politically, pressure builds. People demand action. Faith in existing leadership weakens as conditions fail to improve. Public frustration surfaces in protests, speeches, and growing unrest. The belief that markets will correct themselves begins to lose credibility. Yet even in this period of breakdown, there is careful observation. Economists, policymakers, and ordinary citizens alike begin to question long-held assumptions. Why did the system fail? Who benefited? Who suffered most? These questions linger, heavy and unresolved. Daily life continues under this strain. Families adapt further. Multi-generational households become common. Privacy diminishes, but support increases. Grandparents contribute wisdom and childcare. Children learn frugality instinctively. Waste becomes unthinkable. Mental health suffers quietly. Despair touches many, sometimes deeply. There are stories of men wandering away from home, unable to face their families. Of others sitting silently for hours, lost in thought. These moments are often private, unspoken, carried alone. Yet alongside despair, there is solidarity. Community kitchens expand. Volunteers give what time and energy they can. Churches coordinate aid. Civic groups organize clothing drives and meal distributions. These efforts do not solve the systemic crisis, but they soften its edges. Cultural expressions reflect the times. Literature grows more grounded, more honest. Songs tell stories of hardship and endurance. Art captures stark realities without embellishment. There is less illusion now, less appetite for false optimism. Radio broadcasts begin to shift in tone. Voices speak more directly about the crisis. Public addresses aim to reassure, to explain, to offer some sense of direction. People listen closely, not just for information, but for signs that someone understands the depth of their struggle. By this stage, it is clear that incremental adjustments are not enough. The system, as it existed, cannot simply be repaired. It must be reimagined. This realization does not arrive with celebration. It arrives with fatigue, with the knowledge that change will be difficult, slow, and uncertain. But it also carries a quiet sense of possibility. As we move gently toward the next part, the focus will shift toward response. Toward leadership, policy, and the early efforts to rebuild trust and stability. The breaking open of the system, painful as it is, creates space for new ideas to take root. For now, rest in this moment of reckoning. The old structures have cracked, and the world stands at the edge of transformation, not yet renewed, but no longer unaware of what must change. Part 6. A new voice in a tired nation. By 1932, exhaustion hangs over the country like a low sky that never fully clears. Years of waiting, saving, losing, and adapting have drained not only finances, but spirit. People are no longer shocked by hardship. They are worn down by its persistence. What remains is a quiet, collective desire for something different, even if no one is entirely sure what that difference should look like. The political atmosphere reflects this fatigue. Public confidence in existing leadership has weakened steadily. Speeches that once promised patience and self-correction now feel distant from daily reality. For families struggling to find food or shelter, reassurances about long-term recovery ring hollow. The gap between official optimism and lived experience grows too wide to ignore. Conversations shift. Instead of asking when the depression will end, people ask who is listening. They listen closely themselves, scanning newspapers and radio broadcasts for voices that sound grounded, practical, and sincere. This is the moment when a new tone begins to emerge in national dialogue. Campaigns are no longer framed around prosperity or expansion. They focus instead on relief, recovery, and reform. Words like responsibility and stability take on new meaning. There is less talk of markets and more talk of people. Less emphasis on abstract numbers and more on tangible needs. When election season arrives, it carries a weight unlike any before it. Voter turnout reflects both desperation and hope. People stand in line not because they expect miracles, but because they want acknowledgement. They want to believe that their struggles matter, that they are seen. The outcome marks a turning point. With new leadership comes a shift in approach. The government begins to speak directly to the public in a calmer, more personal way. Radio becomes an essential tool. Voices enter living rooms in the evenings, steady and measured, offering explanations rather than slogans. These broadcasts do not promise instant relief. Instead, they acknowledge hardship openly, validating what people already know in their bones. This honesty matters. For the first time in years, many feel that someone understands the depth of the crisis. That acknowledgement alone brings a subtle sense of relief. It does not fill stomachs or reopen factories, but it restores a small measure of trust. Action follows words, slowly at first. Emergency measures are introduced to stabilize the banking system. Banks are temporarily closed to prevent panic, a move that initially frightens many but soon brings reassurance as institutions reopen under stricter oversight. Depositors regain some confidence knowing their savings are protected, at least in part. The flow of money begins to ease cautiously back into circulation. Relief programs expand. Jobs are created through public works projects. Men and women who have been idle for years find themselves employed repairing roads, building bridges, planting trees, restoring parks. The wages are modest, but they are steady. More importantly, they restore routine and dignity. Work changes how days feel. Morning once again has purpose. Hands grow calloused. Muscles ache in familiar ways. Evenings bring tiredness that feels earned rather than oppressive. For families, a paycheck means food on the table, rent paid, a small sense of security reclaimed. These programs are not without criticism. Some argue they cost too much, that government should not intervene so deeply. Others say they do not go far enough. But for those working under open skies, shaping physical landscapes, debates feel distant. What matters is the present moment, the tangible result of effort. Rural areas see their own initiatives. Soil conservation projects begin, aiming to heal damaged land. Farmers are encouraged to rotate crops, reduce overproduction, and protect topsoil. These changes require patience and education, but they represent a long-term investment in sustainability rather than short-term gain. In communities battered by dust and drought, these efforts bring cautious optimism. The land may not recover quickly, but it is no longer being ignored. Social safety nets take shape as well. Programs are designed to support the elderly, the unemployed, the disabled. These ideas challenge older beliefs about self-reliance, forcing a re-evaluation of what responsibility looks like in times of widespread crisis. For many families, this assistance means survival without shame. Culturally, the shift is noticeable. Hope returns, not as exuberance, but as steadiness. People do not expect abundance. They hope for stability, for fairness, for the chance to plan beyond the next week. Radio remains a constant companion. Voices explain policies in plain language. Listeners gather quietly, absorbing information together. There is comfort in shared understanding, in knowing millions of others are hearing the same words at the same time. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. There are setbacks. Programs encounter obstacles. Bureaucracy frustrates. Funding falls short. Not every effort succeeds. But momentum matters. The sense that something is being tried, adjusted, and improved matters deeply. Daily life reflects this cautious shift. Shops see a few more customers. Streets feel slightly busier. Factories test their machines. Gardens expand. Children return to school more regularly. Laughter surfaces more often, still restrained, but genuine. People remain careful. Savings are guarded. Spending is deliberate. The lessons of the early Depression years are not forgotten. Scarcity has left its imprint, shaping habits that will last a lifetime. Emotionally, there is a subtle release of tension. The constant knot of anxiety loosens just enough to allow deeper breaths. Sleep improves for some. Conversations include plans again, modest and tentative, but present. This period does not end the depression. Hardship continues. Many still struggle. Inequality persists. But the trajectory changes. The nation moves from paralysis to motion, from silence to response. As we prepare to move into the next part, the focus will turn to how these changes affect everyday people more deeply, how work programs reshape communities, and how hope, though cautious, begins to weave itself back into the fabric of daily life. For now, rest in this moment of transition. The road remains long, but it no longer feels endless. In the quiet effort of rebuilding, something steadier begins to take hold. Part 7. Work, Dignity, and the Shape of Days. As relief programs expand and public works projects take root, daily life begins to reorganize itself around a renewed sense of purpose. The depression has not ended, and hardship remains widespread, but something essential has shifted. The long stretch of waiting is slowly replaced by movement. Not frantic or triumphant, but steady, intentional, and grounded in routine. For those who find work through public programs, the change is deeply personal. Mornings regain structure. Alarm clocks are set again. Boots are pulled on before sunrise. Coffee is brewed carefully, savored as a quiet ritual rather than a luxury. The act of leaving home with a destination, with tools to carry and tasks to complete, brings a sense of direction that had been absent for years. The work itself is often physical and demanding. Roads are graded and paved. Bridges are reinforced. Ditches are dug. Parks are cleared and replanted. Trails are carved through forests. Buildings rise slowly from foundations laid by hands that have long waited for something to do. These projects reshape the physical landscape, but they also reshape the inner lives of those involved. Muscles strengthen. Postures straighten. Pride, once eroded by unemployment, begins to return. Not loudly, not boastfully, but quietly, settling back into the bones. Paychecks, though modest, carry enormous meaning. They represent independence regained, even if only partially. Families budget carefully, but now there is money to budget. Rent can be paid on time. Groceries include a few items once considered out of reach. Children notice the difference immediately, sensing relief even if they do not fully understand its source. Communities change as well. Public works bring people together who might not otherwise meet. Men from different neighborhoods labor side by side. Women take on clerical roles, teaching positions, and support work connected to these programs. Conversations form around shared effort rather than shared worry. Lunch breaks are moments of connection. Food is unpacked and shared. Stories are exchanged. There is laughter again, tentative at first, then more relaxed. These small interactions rebuild social bonds weakened by years of isolation and stress. In towns where projects are underway, the atmosphere shifts subtly. Streets feel busier. Shops see increased foot traffic. Local businesses benefit indirectly from wages spent nearby. The economic impact, though uneven, ripples outward. For families still without access to work, the presence of activity brings mixed emotions. Hope, certainly, but also frustration and impatience. Not everyone benefits at once. Some remain on waiting lists. Others are physically unable to participate. These realities create tension, but they also fuel calls for expansion and inclusion. In rural areas, agricultural programs offer a different kind of support. Efforts to stabilize crop prices and reduce overproduction help ease financial pressure on farmers. Soil conservation projects introduce new practices that prioritize long-term health over short-term yield. These changes are not always welcomed immediately. Tradition runs deep, but necessity encourages openness. Fields begin to recover slowly. Windbreaks are planted. Crop rotation becomes more common. The land, though still scarred, shows signs of resilience. Women's roles evolved during this period in important ways. Many have already been central to survival, managing households with remarkable efficiency. Now, additional opportunities emerge. Some find work in education, healthcare, and social services. Others participate in community organizing, relief distribution, and local planning. This expansion of responsibility brings both opportunity and strain. Balancing work with family remains challenging. Expectations shift unevenly. Yet there is a growing recognition of women's contributions beyond the home, a recognition that will carry forward long after the Depression ends. Children experience this era differently depending on circumstance. For those whose parents find work, there is renewed stability. School attendance improves. Clothing, though still modest, is adequate. Meals are more consistent. These children grow up with a keen awareness of fragility, but also with examples of perseverance. For others, childhood remains interrupted. Some continue to work alongside adults. Some move frequently as families chase opportunity. Their education is fragmented. Their sense of permanence remains elusive. These experiences leave lasting impressions, shaping outlooks marked by caution and adaptability. Culturally, work programs influence identity. The idea that collective effort can address shared problems gains traction. Individualism remains valued, but it is tempered by recognition of interdependence. People speak more openly about responsibility to one another, about the role of community in survival. Radio continues to reinforce these themes. Broadcasts highlight projects, explain policies, and share stories of progress. These narratives are not celebratory. They are measured, grounded, emphasizing effort over outcome. Listeners respond to this tone, finding reassurance in realism. There are criticisms and challenges, always present. Some worry about inefficiency. Others question fairness. Debates unfold in newspapers, town halls, and private conversations. These discussions reflect a society actively engaged in redefining its values. Despite disagreements, the presence of work changes the emotional climate. Despair loosens its grip. Depression, both economic and emotional, no longer feels absolute. There are still setbacks. Jobs end when projects finish. Funding fluctuates. But momentum exists. Evenings feel different now. After long days of labor, families gather with a sense of earned rest. Meals are simple but satisfying. Conversations revolve around the day's work, around tangible accomplishments. Children listen, absorbing stories of effort and contribution. Sleep comes more easily to those who are physically tired. Dreams, once filled with anxiety, begin to soften. There is room again for imagining the future, even if cautiously. This period does not erase the scars of the early Depression years. Losses remain. Memories linger. Habits formed in scarcity endure. But the shape of days has changed. Time feels less empty, less oppressive. As we move gently toward the next part, attention will turn to how these programs influence long-term thinking, how ideas about government, responsibility, and security evolve, and how the nation continues to adapt under prolonged strain. For now, rest in this moment where work, dignity, and routine begin to reweave themselves into daily life. The path forward remains uneven, but it is visible again, marked by steady footsteps and shared effort. Part 8. Learning to live with change. As the years of the Depression continue, something subtle but profound begins to take shape. The nation is no longer reacting in crisis mode alone. It is learning how to function within altered realities. Learning which habits must be abandoned and which must be strengthened. Learning that recovery is not a single moment, but a process that reshapes expectations over time. For many people, this period is marked by adjustment rather than relief. Work programs continue, but they are no longer viewed as temporary bridges. They become part of daily life, woven into the rhythm of communities. People begin to understand their roles within these systems. Supervisors learn how to manage large teams. Workers learn new skills. Administrative structures grow more organized, more efficient. This shift brings a sense of continuity. Instead of waiting for the next announcement or fearing sudden collapse, people settle into patterns. They plan weeks ahead rather than days. They make cautious long-term decisions. Gardens are expanded with the expectation of tending them year after year. Repairs are made thoughtfully, with durability in mind. Financial behavior changes permanently. Saving, once associated with prosperity, becomes associated with security. Even small amounts are set aside when possible. Spending is measured carefully, not just out of necessity, but out of philosophy. Waste feels uncomfortable, almost immoral, shaped by memories of scarcity. Families teach these values intentionally. Children learn to turn off lights when leaving a room. Food is finished completely. Broken items are repaired rather than discarded. These lessons are not delivered with lectures, but with example. Over time, they become instinctive. Trust, though partially restored, remains cautious. Banks are approached carefully. Contracts are read closely. Credit is used sparingly. People remember how quickly stability can vanish. This memory becomes part of collective identity, shaping behavior long after conditions improve. Social relationships evolve as well. The shared experience of hardship has blurred class distinctions in many places. Former boundaries soften. People are less impressed by displays of wealth, more attentive to character and reliability. Status shifts subtly toward those who contribute consistently, who show up, who help others navigate difficulty. Community involvement deepens. Local organizations, once peripheral, become central. Cooperative efforts flourish. Neighborhoods organize clean-up days, shared gardens, communal meals. These activities are practical, but they also reinforce belonging. Culturally, creativity adapts to restraint. Entertainment continues, but its tone shifts. Stories emphasize resilience, fairness, and perseverance. Humor remains important, often gentle and self-aware. Audiences respond to narratives that reflect their own experiences honestly. Radio remains a powerful presence, but its role matures. Listeners no longer seek distraction alone. They seek explanation, connection, and reassurance grounded in reality. Broadcasts that speak plainly and respectfully earn loyalty. Education adjusts to the times. Schools incorporate practical skills alongside traditional subjects. Young people are encouraged to think about service, craftsmanship, and adaptability. Career paths are discussed with realism rather than idealism. For young adults coming of age during this period, the Depression defines their worldview. They are cautious, pragmatic, deeply aware of uncertainty. Their ambitions are shaped by a desire for stability rather than excess. These values will influence decisions for decades to come. Emotionally, people develop endurance. They are less easily shaken by setbacks. They have learned that hardship can be survived. While anxiety remains, it no longer dominates every thought. There is room for quiet optimism, tempered by experience. This endurance is visible in small moments. A family planning a modest celebration. A couple saving for a simple wedding. A household discussing the future without fear overpowering hope. These acts, though ordinary, represent significant emotional recovery. Not all experiences are positive. Fatigue persists. The Depression's length wears people down. Some struggle with ongoing unemployment or underemployment. Inequities remain unresolved. Rural and urban experiences continue to differ sharply. Yet the capacity to cope has grown. The idea of government involvement becomes normalized. What once felt radical now feels necessary. Public programs are evaluated not only on cost, but on impact. Debates continue, but the premise that collective action can serve the public good is firmly established. This shift reshapes national identity. People begin to see themselves as part of a shared system, not merely isolated actors. Responsibility feels mutual. Success is measured less by individual gain and more by communal stability. As the mid-1930s approach, the Depression still lingers, but it no longer defines every moment. Life contains hardship and normalcy side by side. Children play. Work continues. Art is made. Love persists. There is a sense of living within history rather than waiting for it to pass. As we move gently toward the next part, attention will turn to tensions that arise alongside adaptation. Conflicts between labor and management, debates over policy, and the emotional strain of prolonged effort begin to surface more clearly. For now, rest in this moment of adjustment. Change has been accepted, not with enthusiasm, but with understanding. The world has shifted, and people have learned how to stand within that shift, steady and awake, carrying forward what matters most. Part 9. Strain beneath the surface. By the mid-1930s, the nation has found its footing, but the ground beneath it remains uneven. On the surface, routines have returned. Work programs continue. Communities function. Children attend school. Shops open and close with predictable hours. Yet beneath this appearance of stability, strain accumulates quietly, shaped by years of effort without full relief. For many, the Depression has become a test of endurance rather than survival alone. Jobs exist, but they are not always sufficient. Wages remain low. Employment is often temporary, tied to projects that eventually end. Families live with constant calculation, adjusting to uncertainty that never fully disappears. Relief comes in increments, not in resolution. This prolonged tension begins to show. Labor relations grow more complicated. Workers, having experienced both unemployment and structured public employment, become more aware of their value. They recognize the importance of fair wages, safe conditions, and job security. Conversations about rights move from private spaces into public discourse. Strikes and protests increase. They are not sudden explosions of anger, but organized expressions of frustration. Workers gather peacefully, carrying signs, standing shoulder to shoulder. Their demands are practical: stability, respect, a voice in decisions that affect their livelihoods. Employers respond with caution. Some are sympathetic, having endured losses themselves. Others resist change, fearing additional costs or loss of control. Negotiations unfold slowly, sometimes tensely, shaping a new relationship between labor and management. These conflicts do not define every workplace, but they reflect broader shifts in thinking. The Depression has altered power dynamics. Survival has highlighted interdependence. Neither workers nor employers can ignore this reality. Political debate intensifies as well. Public programs are scrutinized closely. Supporters argue that they provide essential stability and dignity. Critics warn of dependency and inefficiency. These debates are not abstract. They play out in kitchens, on job sites, in town halls. People argue thoughtfully, drawing from lived experience rather than ideology alone. Despite disagreement, engagement itself is a sign of health. A society willing to question and adjust is one that continues to move forward. Emotionally, fatigue deepens for many families. The novelty of recovery has worn off. The effort required to maintain stability is constant. Small setbacks feel heavier after years of restraint. Illness, accidents, or sudden job loss can still destabilize entire households. Mental resilience, while strong, is tested repeatedly. Some respond by narrowing their focus further, concentrating on immediate needs and trusted routines. Others seek meaning in activism, faith, or community leadership. There is a sense that passivity is no longer acceptable, that participation matters. In rural areas, challenges persist. Agricultural reforms help, but recovery is uneven. Weather remains unpredictable. Debt lingers. Migration slows but does not stop entirely. Rural communities adapt, but they do so under continued pressure. Urban centers face their own difficulties. Population density magnifies hardship. Housing shortages persist. Infrastructure strains under renewed use. Yet cities also become hubs of innovation and organization, where ideas spread quickly and movements gain momentum. Cultural expression reflects this tension. Stories grow more complex. Characters are flawed. Endings are not always neat. Audiences respond to honesty over comfort. There is less appetite for fantasy alone, more for narratives that acknowledge struggle without despair. Radio broadcasts and newspapers play a critical role in shaping understanding. Information flows widely. Misinformation is challenged. Public discourse grows more sophisticated, grounded in shared experience. Children growing up in this period absorb these dynamics deeply. They witness debates at the dinner table. They see parents balancing hope and caution. They learn that progress requires effort and vigilance. These lessons shape their values profoundly. Community bonds, while strong, are tested by disagreement. Not all tensions resolve easily. Friendships strain under differing opinions. Yet the willingness to remain engaged, to continue dialogue, prevents fragmentation. There is also quiet gratitude woven into daily life. People appreciate stability more keenly. A steady job, even if modest, is valued deeply. Simple pleasures carry greater weight. A warm meal, a well-kept home, a safe walk through the neighborhood. This gratitude does not erase frustration, but it tempers it. As the decade moves forward, the depression becomes a complex chapter rather than a single narrative. It contains recovery and struggle, cooperation and conflict, hope and exhaustion intertwined. As we prepare to move into the next part, attention will shift toward the looming presence of global change. Events beyond national borders begin to influence thinking, policy, and preparation, subtly at first, then more clearly. For now, rest in this moment of tension held in balance. Beneath the surface, strain persists, but so does resilience. The ability to hold both at once becomes one of the era's defining strengths, shaping the path ahead with patience and awareness. Part 10. The world beyond the horizon. As the later years of the 1930s unfold, attention begins to drift outward, beyond familiar streets and fields, beyond local struggles and national debates. The Depression has reshaped daily life so thoroughly that people have learned to live within its boundaries. Yet even as routines stabilize, a subtle awareness grows that the world does not exist in isolation. Events elsewhere begin to matter more. Newspapers devote increasing space to international news. Radio broadcasts carry reports from distant places, spoken in careful tones that suggest concern without alarm. Names of faraway cities and countries become familiar through repetition, even to those who may never expect to travel beyond their home region. This expanding awareness brings mixed emotions. On one hand, there is fatigue. After years of hardship, many people feel they have little energy to spare for problems beyond their own borders. Survival has required focus and restraint. The idea of additional uncertainty feels heavy. On the other hand, there is recognition. The Depression has taught painful lessons about interconnectedness. People have seen how distant financial decisions can ripple through households thousands of miles away. They understand now, more deeply than before, that isolation is an illusion. International economic instability mirrors domestic experience. Countries struggle with unemployment, currency fluctuations, and social unrest. Trade slows. Political systems strain under pressure. These global challenges feel eerily familiar to those who have lived through economic collapse at home. The language used to describe these events reflects caution. Words like instability, tension, and uncertainty recur. The tone is measured, but the message is clear. The world is unsettled. At home, policymakers take note. Economic recovery remains incomplete, but planning extends beyond immediate relief. There is growing emphasis on preparedness, on safeguarding systems against future shocks. Financial regulations are reviewed. Institutions are monitored more closely. The memory of collapse remains vivid, guiding decision-making. For ordinary people, this broader perspective influences daily thinking in subtle ways. Conversations at dinner tables include mentions of international news, often framed by personal concern. Parents wonder what kind of world their children will inherit. Young adults consider how global events might affect their opportunities. Veterans of earlier conflicts listen carefully, recalling times when distant tensions eventually reached domestic shores. Yet daily life continues, grounded in the practical. Work programs remain active. Families manage budgets carefully. Communities maintain the support structures they have built. The depression still shapes priorities, but it no longer dominates every thought. This balance between outward awareness and inward focus becomes characteristic of the period. Emotionally, people are more guarded. The optimism that briefly returned with early recovery efforts has matured into realism. Hope exists, but it is cautious, informed by experience. There is less faith in guarantees, more trust in preparation. Cultural expressions reflect this shift. Stories grow broader in scope. Themes of responsibility, vigilance, and collective effort recur. The idea that peace and stability require active maintenance gains traction. Radio continues to play a central role. International reports are woven into daily programming, offering context and explanation. Listeners absorb this information quietly, often without immediate discussion, letting it settle alongside domestic concerns. Children, too, absorb these signals. School lessons include geography and current events framed by relevance rather than abstraction. Young minds learn that the world is interconnected, that events elsewhere can influence life at home. In rural areas, this global awareness feels more distant, yet still present. Farmers listen to radio updates while working fields. They connect international trade policies to crop prices, understanding how global demand shapes local livelihood. Urban centers, with their concentration of information and industry, feel these shifts more directly. Ports, factories, and financial institutions respond to global signals. Workers sense changes in demand, in production schedules, in employment prospects. Despite this expanding horizon, the Depression's core lessons remain central. People continue to value stability over risk. Savings are protected. Debt is approached cautiously. The idea of endless growth has been replaced by appreciation for balance and sustainability. There is also a growing sense of responsibility toward future generations. Policies and practices are evaluated not only for immediate benefit, but for long-term impact. The question shifts from what can be gained quickly to what can be maintained responsibly. This mindset influences national discourse. Public discussions increasingly acknowledge limits. Resources are finite. Systems require care. Progress must be measured. These ideas, once considered pessimistic, are now seen as prudent. Emotionally, there is quiet resolve. People have endured much. They have adapted. They have learned to live with uncertainty without being paralyzed by it. This resilience, though born of hardship, becomes a source of strength. As the decade advances, the Depression gradually loosens its grip, though unevenly. Recovery is real but incomplete. Scars remain. Habits formed in scarcity persist. Yet there is forward motion. The awareness of a wider world does not overwhelm daily life, but it informs it. People understand now that their story is part of a larger narrative, shaped by forces both near and far. As we prepare to move gently into the next part, attention will turn toward how these global tensions begin to influence domestic priorities more directly, and how the lessons of the Depression shape responses to emerging challenges. For now, rest in this moment of widened perspective. The horizon has expanded, bringing both caution and clarity. The world feels larger, more complex, yet more comprehensible through the lens of hard-earned experience. Part 11. Holding on to what was learned. As the later 1930s continue to unfold, the Great Depression begins to recede slightly from the center of daily attention, though it never truly leaves. It becomes less like a storm raging overhead and more like a deep weather pattern that shapes every decision, every habit, every expectation. People do not forget what they have lived through. Instead, they carry it with them, quietly and deliberately, shaping how they move forward. Recovery, where it exists, is uneven. Some industries begin to stabilize. Certain regions feel improvement sooner than others. Employment rises in places connected to public works, manufacturing, and infrastructure. Yet for many families, life remains tight. There is no sudden return to abundance. Progress arrives in small increments, almost imperceptibly, and is often interrupted by setbacks. This unevenness reinforces a central lesson of the era. Stability cannot be assumed. People plan differently now. Long-term thinking becomes cautious and practical. When money comes in, it is divided carefully. Some for immediate needs. Some, if possible, set aside quietly, untouched. Even those who regain comfortable footing rarely return to the spending habits of the past. Memory acts as restraint. Homes reflect this shift. They are kept tidy, functional, and modest. Objects are valued not for novelty, but for usefulness. Tools are maintained. Clothing is stored carefully. Kitchens remain organized around efficiency and thrift. These habits are not spoken of as sacrifices. They are simply the way life is done now. Children raised in this environment absorb these patterns deeply. They grow up understanding the difference between want and need. They learn to wait, to repair, to reuse. These lessons become instinctive, shaping adulthood in lasting ways. Education continues, shaped by practicality. Schools emphasize skills that feel relevant to uncertain futures. Problem solving, cooperation, responsibility. The idea that knowledge must serve life, not exist apart from it, gains traction. Emotionally, people live with a blend of relief and vigilance. There is gratitude for what has been regained. Work, routine, a sense of direction. But there is also a quiet fear of reversal. The Depression has taught how fragile systems can be, how quickly stability can collapse. This awareness does not paralyze, but it informs. People celebrate cautiously. Holidays are observed with restraint. Gatherings are warm and meaningful, but modest. Gifts are simple. Food is prepared thoughtfully. The emphasis is on presence rather than excess. Community bonds remain strong. Years of shared hardship have created trust that does not disappear easily. Neighbors continue to look out for one another. Informal support systems remain active. A family facing difficulty is rarely left entirely alone. These networks prove valuable as new uncertainties emerge. International tensions grow more visible. While still distant, they influence planning and conversation. Governments consider preparedness. Industries evaluate capacity. Families listen closely to news, sensing that history may be shifting again. Yet the response is different now than it might have been before the Depression. There is less complacency, less assumption that problems will resolve themselves. The Depression has trained people to recognize early signs of instability, to respond deliberately rather than react impulsively. Politically, this mindset shapes public expectations. Leaders are judged on competence and transparency. empty assurances hold little weight. Practical solutions are valued over grand promises. Debate remains active, sometimes heated, but it is grounded in lived experience. People argue not from theory alone, but from memory. From the knowledge of what happens when systems fail and support is absent. Culturally, reflection becomes prominent. Stories, music, and art increasingly explore memory, responsibility, and endurance. There is respect for quiet strength, for ordinary lives shaped by extraordinary circumstances. Audiences connect deeply with narratives that honor resilience without romanticizing hardship. Radio continues to serve as a shared space. Broadcasts carry news, explanations, and reassurance. Families still gather to listen, though the mood has shifted. The urgency of crisis has softened into attentive awareness. For older generations, the Depression becomes a reference point, a dividing line between before and after. They speak of it carefully, sometimes sparingly, as though naming it too often might summon its return. Yet its influence is constant. For younger adults, it forms the foundation of identity. They do not remember a world without caution. Their ambitions are shaped by stability rather than expansion. Security matters deeply. Responsibility feels personal. This generational imprint will last for decades. As the nation moves slowly forward, the Depression becomes less visible but more embedded. It lives in habits, in attitudes, in policies, in expectations. It shapes how risk is understood and how safety is valued. There is also a growing sense of readiness. People know now that hardship can come without warning. They know that preparation matters, that cooperation matters, that compassion matters. These lessons, hard-earned, remain close. The Depression has not ended fully, but its role is changing. It is no longer the sole focus of attention. Instead, it becomes part of the background against which new challenges appear. As we prepare to move gently into the next part, attention will turn toward how the approaching end of the decade brings transformation, how economic recovery intersects with global change, and how the lessons of the Depression influence responses to what lies ahead. For now, rest in this moment of reflection. The worst has not been forgotten, but it has been understood. In that understanding, there is steadiness. And in that steadiness, the strength to face whatever comes next. Part 12. Standing at the edge of a new era. As the 1930s draw closer to their end, there is a sense of standing at a threshold. The Great Depression still lingers, woven into daily habits and quiet anxieties, yet its grip has loosened enough for people to look forward without fear dominating every thought. Life no longer feels suspended. Instead, it feels poised, as though history itself is taking a slow breath before turning a page. Recovery continues, uneven and cautious. Factories hum more reliably in some regions. Employment rises in industries connected to infrastructure, manufacturing, and defense-related production. Wages remain modest, but steadier. Families that once survived day-to-day now plan months ahead. The future, while still uncertain, is no longer unthinkable. Yet no one believes that the old world has returned. The Depression has changed how people interpret prosperity. Abundance is viewed carefully, almost skeptically. Success is measured not by speed or scale, but by durability. Can it last? Can it withstand pressure? Can it support those who depend on it? This mindset shapes decisions large and small. At home, Households continue to operate with restraint. Savings, if rebuilt, are guarded. Major purchases are delayed until absolutely necessary. Debt is approached with caution. These habits feel permanent now, not temporary responses to crisis. In communities, shared responsibility remains central. Mutual aid networks, once born of desperation, evolve into lasting institutions. Cooperative buying, shared resources, and community planning continue even as conditions improve. The memory of isolation during the worst years has made togetherness feel essential rather than optional. Children growing up in this period sense the change without fully understanding its origins. They see parents less burdened, more present. They hear conversations shift from worry to planning. They feel stability returning slowly, like warmth after a long winter. For adolescents and young adults, the moment feels complex. Opportunities expand slightly, but caution remains embedded. Career paths are chosen with pragmatism. Trades, teaching, engineering, and skilled labor feel appealing because they promise reliability. Dreams exist, but they are grounded. Emotionally, people carry layered feelings. There is relief, certainly. Gratitude for survival. Pride in endurance. But there is also vigilance. The Depression taught that comfort can vanish quickly. This awareness does not rob joy, but it shapes it. Celebrations are meaningful rather than extravagant. Success is appreciated quietly. Nationally, confidence begins to rebuild. Public institutions function with greater coordination. Financial systems are more regulated. Safeguards are in place to prevent unchecked speculation. These changes reflect lessons learned at great cost. Trust, while still cautious, grows gradually. At the same time, the world beyond national borders grows louder in daily awareness. International tensions, once distant, now feel closer. News reports carry urgency. Political shifts abroad raise questions at home. Military preparedness enters public conversation, not with enthusiasm, but with realism. The Depression has altered how people respond to these developments. There is less appetite for denial. Less belief that distance guarantees safety. People understand now that global forces can reshape local life abruptly. This understanding breeds seriousness rather than panic. Government planning reflects this shift. Economic recovery is no longer viewed in isolation from global stability. Industrial capacity, employment, and national security become interconnected priorities. Investments are made with an eye toward resilience under strain. For workers, this creates new opportunities and new uncertainties. Employment linked to defense industries offers stability, but also carries emotional weight. The memory of past conflict lingers. Older generations recall previous wars with sober clarity. Younger ones sense the gravity without first-hand memory. Families discuss these changes quietly. Parents reassure children without offering false certainty. Adults weigh hopes for peace against preparation for conflict. These conversations are measured, thoughtful, shaped by the discipline learned during years of hardship. Culturally, the tone shifts again. Stories and music reflect a blend of endurance and alertness. Themes of responsibility, sacrifice, and collective effort become more prominent. There is respect for realism, for narratives that acknowledge complexity without surrendering to fear. Radio broadcasts adapt accordingly. News is delivered carefully, with context and explanation. Public addresses emphasize unity, preparedness, and steady resolve. Listeners respond to this tone, finding comfort in clarity rather than reassurance alone. In rural areas, life remains shaped by land and weather, but stability improves gradually. Conservation efforts show results. Soil recovers in places. Harvests become more predictable. Farming families remain cautious, but they feel less constantly threatened. Urban centers continue to evolve. Infrastructure built during public works programs supports growth. Transportation improves. Housing slowly expands. Cities feel more functional, more capable of sustaining population. Despite progress, inequality persists. Some communities recover faster than others. Racial and economic disparities remain deeply rooted. These realities are increasingly visible, sparking conversations that will continue long after the depression fades from immediate memory. The willingness to confront these issues reflects growth. People have learned that ignoring systemic problems allows them to deepen. The depression exposed vulnerabilities not just in markets, but in social structures. Awareness of these truths shapes ongoing debate and reform. Emotionally, there is a growing sense of readiness. Not readiness for hardship itself, but readiness to respond. People trust their ability to adapt. They know how to organize, how to endure, how to support one another. This confidence is quiet but profound. The depression has not simply taken things away. It has also given something enduring. Perspective. As the decade nears its close, life feels fuller, though still restrained. People laugh more easily. Plans feel possible. Children imagine futures that extend beyond survival. Yet caution remains, a steady companion rather than a heavy burden. This balance defines the moment. Standing at the edge of a new era, the nation carries forward lessons written in long years of struggle. Lessons about patience, about humility, about shared responsibility, about the importance of building systems that serve people rather than abandon them. As we prepare to move gently into the next part, attention will turn toward how these lessons are tested by accelerating global events, and how the resilience shaped by the Great Depression influences responses to the challenges ahead. For now, rest in this quiet threshold. The past has been endured. The future approaches, uncertain but approachable, shaped by memory, steadiness, and a deeper understanding of what truly sustains a society. Part 13. When old lessons meet new pressures. As the nation moves further toward the close of the 1930s, the sense of standing between eras becomes more pronounced. The Great Depression no longer dominates every waking thought, yet it remains present in subtle, persistent ways. It lives in habits, in caution, in the way people listen carefully before trusting good news. At the same time, new pressures begin to assert themselves, testing whether the lessons learned through hardship can withstand unfamiliar demands. Daily life carries a strange duality. On the surface, routines appear stable. Work continues. Children attend school more regularly. Markets function with greater predictability. Homes feel warmer, both physically and emotionally, than they did at the height of the Depression. There is movement, planning, and cautious optimism. Yet beneath this steadiness lies alertness. People sense that history is not finished exerting its force. The Depression taught them that change rarely announces itself loudly at first. It arrives quietly, through small disruptions, shifting priorities, altered conversations. This awareness sharpens attention. International events increasingly intrude upon domestic life. News arrives not as distant curiosity, but as relevant information. Political changes abroad feel consequential. Economic recovery at home is now understood as vulnerable to global instability. For families, this awareness shapes planning. Parents talk more openly about preparedness. Not in fearful tones, but practical ones. Savings are maintained where possible. Skills are valued. Education is encouraged not only for personal advancement, but for adaptability. The idea that one must be ready to adjust quickly feels ingrained. Young adults feel this pressure keenly. Those entering the workforce face choices shaped by both depression memory and global uncertainty. Stable industries feel safer than speculative ones. Trades, engineering, manufacturing, and public service attract interest because they offer tangible contribution and reliability. Dreams are shaped less by glamour and more by resilience. Emotionally, there is a quiet maturity to this generation. They have grown up watching adults navigate loss, adaptation, and recovery. They understand that security is built deliberately. Their ambitions carry responsibility within them, not as burden, but as grounding. In workplaces, the atmosphere reflects this seriousness. Employers and workers alike remember instability. Negotiations over wages, hours, and conditions are informed by shared experience. There is more willingness to compromise, to seek balance rather than domination. Conflict still exists, but it unfolds within a framework shaped by mutual recognition of vulnerability. Public programs remain active, though their role evolves. Some initiatives wind down as recovery strengthens. Others adapt to new priorities. Infrastructure projects shift toward maintenance and improvement rather than emergency relief. Employment tied to national preparedness grows quietly, altering the economic landscape without overt announcement. Communities observe these changes attentively. There is gratitude for opportunity, but also unease about what these shifts imply. Older generations, having lived through previous conflicts, recognize familiar patterns. They speak carefully, often in subdued tones, sharing memories not to alarm, but to inform. Children overhear these conversations. They sense seriousness even when details are withheld. The world feels larger to them now, more complex. Their games, their questions, their imaginations reflect this awareness subtly. They play not only at building, but at organizing, defending, preparing. Culturally, this period carries a restrained tone. Entertainment continues, but narratives grow more layered. Stories explore responsibility, sacrifice, and moral choice. Audiences respond to these themes, recognizing their relevance. There is less appetite for excess, more for meaning. Music reflects this shift as well. Songs carry undertones of reflection and resolve. Melodies are steady rather than exuberant. They comfort without distracting, grounding listeners in shared experience. Radio remains central. Broadcasts now balance domestic updates with international context. Voices speak with calm authority, offering explanation rather than speculation. This measured delivery resonates with listeners who value clarity after years of confusion. Trust, while cautious, extends toward institutions that demonstrate competence and transparency. The Depression reshaped expectations. People no longer assume perfection, but they expect honesty and effort. Politically, this expectation influences discourse. Leaders are challenged to demonstrate readiness rather than optimism alone. Policies are debated with awareness of consequence. The public has learned to ask hard questions, to examine assumptions, to demand accountability. This engagement reflects growth rather than unrest. The Depression taught that disengagement allows problems to deepen. Participation feels necessary, even when tiring. People attend meetings, follow news, discuss policy at home. Civic responsibility becomes personal rather than abstract. In rural areas, stability improves gradually. Conservation efforts continue to show results. Land responds slowly but positively to care. Farmers remain cautious, but they feel less constantly threatened. Planning extends beyond immediate survival. Investments are made carefully, with resilience in mind. Urban centers evolve alongside these changes. Infrastructure built earlier supports expanding activity. Transportation networks hum more steadily. Neighborhoods regain vitality. Yet density amplifies awareness of global shifts. Ports, factories, and financial centers feel connected to distant events in tangible ways. Despite progress, memories of hardship remain close. People still recall hunger, unemployment, displacement. These memories shape empathy. There is greater sensitivity to suffering, less tolerance for indifference. Community support remains active, not because crisis demands it, but because experience has proven its value. Emotionally, there is steadiness mixed with anticipation. Not anticipation of relief, but of responsibility. The sense that something may be required of everyone. The Depression prepared people to endure, but also to act. This readiness does not feel dramatic. It feels quiet, settled, and deliberate. Evenings reflect this tone. Families gather, sharing meals and conversation. Discussions range from daily concerns to broader topics. There is seriousness, but also warmth. Laughter still surfaces. Joy remains present, though tempered by awareness. Sleep comes more easily than it once did, yet minds remain attentive. Dreams are less anxious, more purposeful. The future, though uncertain, feels approachable rather than overwhelming. As we move gently toward the next part, attention will turn to how these mounting pressures begin to reshape priorities more visibly, how economic recovery and global tension intersect more directly, and how the resilience forged during the Great Depression influences decisions that reach beyond economics. For now, rest in this moment where old lessons meet new demands. The past has trained the present well. What lies ahead will test that training, but the foundation is strong, built slowly through years of patience, restraint, and shared endurance. Part 14. Prepared by hardship. As the final years of the 1930s continue to unfold, the influence of the Great Depression reveals itself in an unexpected way. The years of struggle, restraint, and adaptation have not simply been endured. They have trained an entire society to function under pressure. What once felt like deprivation now appears, in retrospect, as preparation. Daily life reflects this readiness. Households operate efficiently. Nothing is taken for granted. Supplies are kept orderly. Repairs are handled promptly. Budgets are managed with care. These habits, formed out of necessity, now feel natural. People know how to live with less, how to stretch resources, how to adapt when plans change. This competence brings quiet confidence. When new demands arise, they are met with steadiness rather than panic. The Depression taught that chaos does not require collapse, that systems can be rebuilt, that people can adjust if they move deliberately. Employment patterns reflect this shift. Industries connected to infrastructure and manufacturing grow more active. Production increases gradually, absorbing workers who once relied on relief programs. Skills learned through public works translate smoothly into these roles. Men and women who spent years building roads, bridges, and public spaces now apply that experience elsewhere. The transition is not sudden, but it is noticeable. Work feels purposeful in a new way. There is an awareness that effort contributes to something larger than individual survival. This sense of contribution matters deeply to those who remember long periods of waiting. For families, this shift brings cautious relief. Income becomes more reliable. Planning extends further into the future. Children sense stability deepening, even if they do not fully understand its cause. The atmosphere in many homes grows lighter, though discipline and restraint remain. Emotionally, people feel capable. They have learned that uncertainty can be navigated. That hardship does not erase dignity. That cooperation strengthens endurance. These lessons reduce fear, even as new challenges loom. International events continue to influence domestic thinking. News from abroad grows more urgent. Political tensions escalate. Military developments are discussed openly. Yet the public response remains measured. The depression tempered emotional reactions. People have learned to absorb difficult information without immediate panic. This does not mean indifference. Rather, it reflects a belief in preparation over reaction. People trust planning, organization, and collective effort more than impulsive response. This mindset influences both personal behavior and public policy. Government action reflects this confidence. Institutions function with greater coordination. Policies emphasize readiness, stability, and long-term resilience. Economic recovery and national preparedness become intertwined goals. Investments are made not only to stimulate growth, but to ensure capacity under strain. Public communication mirrors this tone. Radio broadcasts remain calm and informative. Messages emphasize unity, responsibility, and steady effort. The public responds positively to this approach, having learned to value clarity over reassurance alone. Communities feel the impact of these shifts. Civic engagement increases. People participate in planning, training, and organization. Local initiatives align with national priorities. There is a sense of collective movement, quiet but purposeful. For older generations, this period carries reflection. They recognize how hardship reshaped values. They see in younger people a seriousness that comes from early exposure to struggle. There is pride in this resilience, mixed with concern for what may lie ahead. Young adults carry this preparedness into their identities. They are adaptable, cautious, and cooperative. Their sense of responsibility extends beyond self-interest. They understand that stability is built collectively. These qualities shape their approach to work, relationships, and citizenship. Culturally, narratives evolve again. Stories highlight competence, sacrifice, and moral clarity. Heroes are not defined by wealth or glamour, but by reliability and integrity. Audiences respond to characters who embody steadiness under pressure. Music reflects this mood as well. Melodies are firm and grounded. Lyrics speak of endurance, duty, and hope rooted in effort rather than fantasy. These songs resonate deeply with listeners who recognize their own experiences in them. In rural areas, recovery continues unevenly. Land responds slowly to conservation efforts. Some regions stabilize. Others remain vulnerable. Farmers remain cautious, but they feel better equipped to face uncertainty. Knowledge gained through hardship informs ongoing practice. Urban centers grow more active. Manufacturing expands. Transportation networks hum with increased use. Employment opportunities widen. Cities feel energized, though not reckless. Growth is tempered by memory. Despite these developments, humility remains central. People do not assume immunity from hardship. The Depression stripped away illusions of permanence. Preparedness does not breed arrogance. It fosters attentiveness. Even moments of progress are met with quiet reflection. Families discuss the past openly, passing down stories not as warnings, but as lessons. Children learn where habits came from, why lights are turned off, why food is not wasted, why savings matter. These stories anchor identity. Emotionally, there is a sense of standing firmly. Not leaning forward in anticipation, not retreating in fear. Simply standing, grounded by experience, ready to respond. Evenings reflect this stability. Homes feel calm. Conversations are thoughtful. Laughter returns more easily. There is room for hope, tempered by realism. Sleep comes with less anxiety. Dreams are not haunted by scarcity as they once were. They are filled with images of work completed, tasks managed, challenges met. As we prepare to move gently toward the next part, attention will turn toward how this preparedness is tested by rapidly unfolding global events, and how the discipline learned during the Great Depression shapes responses that extend beyond economics. For now, rest in this moment of readiness. Hardship has refined resilience. What was once endured has become strength, carried quietly forward into an uncertain but navigable future. Part 15. The weight of memory moving forward. As the decade draws closer to its end, the Great Depression exists no longer as an immediate emergency, but as a presence that follows people quietly through their days. It has become something carried rather than confronted, a memory with weight, shaping choices even when it is not spoken aloud. Life moves forward, yet it does so carefully, guided by what has been learned the hard way. In many households, there is a rhythm now that feels settled. Mornings begin with purpose. Work is more consistent. Children leave for school with lunches packed thoughtfully, portions measured, nothing excessive, nothing wasted. Even in homes where income has stabilized, habits of restraint remain. The Depression has taught that comfort is fragile, and people honor that lesson by treating stability with respect. This respect shapes how success is experienced. When things go well, there is gratitude rather than celebration. A steady paycheck is appreciated quietly. A repaired roof or paid-off bill brings relief more than pride. People do not boast about progress. They protect it. Emotionally, this creates a culture of humility. There is an understanding that fortune can change without warning. That no one is immune. This awareness softens judgments and deepens empathy. When someone struggles, others recognize how quickly roles can reverse. Communities reflect this understanding. Mutual aid networks remain active even as immediate need declines. Soup kitchens close some days, but reopen easily when required. Churches and civic groups maintain systems built during crisis, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. These structures stand ready, like tools kept sharp. Social relationships deepen in subtle ways. People listen more carefully to one another. Conversations linger. Advice is offered thoughtfully. There is less impatience, less assumption. Hardship has slowed the pace of interaction, encouraging presence over distraction. For children, this environment shapes emotional intelligence. They grow up watching adults navigate complexity with calm. They learn that feelings matter but do not always dictate action. That fear can exist without controlling behavior. These lessons are absorbed quietly, shaping character over time. In schools, teachers notice a difference. Students raised during the Depression often display seriousness beyond their years. They approach tasks with care. They value structure. Discipline feels familiar rather than restrictive. Creativity exists, but it is grounded, purposeful. Young adults entering independence carry this grounding with them. They form households cautiously. Marriage, when chosen, is deliberate. Family planning reflects responsibility. Careers are pursued with attention to stability rather than status. These choices are not born of pessimism, but of clarity. At the national level, this collective mindset influences policy. Economic planning emphasizes safeguards. Financial systems are monitored closely. Risk is managed rather than embraced blindly. The memory of collapse informs decision-making at every level. Public trust, though still cautious, rests on demonstrated competence. Leaders are expected to communicate clearly, to acknowledge uncertainty, to prepare rather than promise. The Depression reshaped expectations of authority, replacing faith in inevitability with respect for effort and accountability. As global events accelerate, this mindset proves significant. The public absorbs troubling news without hysteria. People discuss development soberly, weighing implications rather than reacting emotionally. The Depression trained them to process difficulty slowly, thoughtfully. This does not eliminate anxiety. Concern is present, sometimes deeply. But it is contained. Managed. People have learned that fear does not disappear when ignored, but it can be guided by reason and preparation. In workplaces, this approach manifests as diligence. Employees show up reliably. Tasks are completed thoroughly. There is pride in competence. Employers recognize the value of steady labor, having witnessed its absence. Relationships between management and workers, while imperfect, are shaped by mutual recognition of dependence. Rural communities maintain cautious optimism. Farms operate with improved practices. Conservation efforts continue. Harvests are more predictable, though still vulnerable. Farmers plan conservatively, avoiding overextension. The land, treated with respect, responds slowly but positively. Urban centers feel more energized. Manufacturing increases. Transportation networks are active. Employment opportunities expand. Yet cities do not return to reckless expansion. Growth is deliberate. Infrastructure is maintained. Housing development is measured. The memory of overcrowding, unemployment, and displacement tempers ambition. Culturally, storytelling reflects this maturity. Narratives emphasize continuity over triumph. Characters endure, adapt, and persist. Success is portrayed as stability maintained rather than obstacles conquered. Audiences connect deeply with these themes, finding validation in realism. Music remains an anchor. Songs speak softly of endurance, loyalty, and hope grounded in effort. Melodies are reassuring rather than stirring. They do not urge escape, but offer companionship. Radio continues to unify. Broadcasts provide context, explanation, and steady presence. The voice in the radio is no longer a distraction from hardship. It is a guide through complexity. People listen not for escape, but for understanding. Evenings in homes reflect this steadiness. Meals are shared. Conversations flow gently. Plans are discussed without urgency. There is laughter, but it is relaxed, unforced. The tension that once dominated domestic spaces has softened. Sleep improves for many. Nights are quieter. Dreams are less troubled. The body remembers hunger and fear, but it no longer lives within them constantly. Rest becomes restorative again. Still, the depression does not vanish. Its influence remains in reflexes, in how people respond to uncertainty, in how they value preparedness, in how they care for one another. This memory becomes a guide rather than a burden. People do not dwell on the worst years obsessively, but they do not forget them either. Forgetting feels dangerous. Remembering feels protective. As the world changes around them, this memory offers orientation. It reminds people that systems matter, that cooperation matters, that ignoring inequality allows instability to grow, that resilience is built slowly, through patience and shared effort. These lessons extend beyond economics. They shape morality, responsibility, civic identity. The depression has carved a deeper understanding of what it means to belong to a society. As we move gently toward the next part, attention will turn toward how these values are tested more directly, how preparation meets reality as global events accelerate, and how the quiet strength forged during the Great Depression supports people through another historic transition. For now, rest in this moment where memory walks beside progress. The past has not been erased. It has been integrated. And in that integration lies a steadiness that allows life to continue forward, aware, prepared, and grounded, even as the horizon shifts once more. Part 16. Carrying strength into uncertainty. As the final stretch of the 1930s unfolds, life moves forward with a steady, deliberate pace shaped by long memory. The Great Depression no longer dominates headlines or daily conversation, yet it continues to guide behavior in ways both visible and subtle. People have learned not to rush towards certainty. They have learned how to hold uncertainty gently, without letting it overwhelm them. There is a quiet competence in this moment. Homes operate smoothly. Chores are done efficiently. Schedules are kept. There is comfort in routine, not because life is dull, but because predictability has become precious. Small rituals anchor the day. Morning light through kitchen windows. The familiar sound of a kettle heating. The measured packing of lunches. These details feel grounding, like stones placed carefully along a path. Work, for many, has become steadier. Industries hum with consistent activity. Wages remain modest, but they arrive regularly. The act of earning feels meaningful not for what it allows people to buy, but for what it represents. Stability. Contribution. Belonging. Those who spent years on public works projects bring their skills forward. They know how to work in teams, how to follow plans, how to adapt when conditions change. This experience proves valuable now, as new demands require coordination and discipline. There is pride in being capable. Not the pride of display, but the pride of reliability, of showing up, of doing what needs to be done without complaint. This attitude, shaped by years of scarcity, becomes a defining strength. Families sense this steadiness. Parents speak with more confidence, even when acknowledging uncertainty. Children feel safer, though not sheltered. They understand that life can change, but they also see that change can be managed. This balance shapes emotional resilience. Schoolrooms reflect this atmosphere. Students approach learning seriously. They ask thoughtful questions. They understand effort. Teachers notice attentiveness, patience, and cooperation. These qualities are not taught directly. They are absorbed through example. Young adults stepping into independence carry this grounding with them. They make careful choices. They save when they can. They plan thoughtfully. They do not expect guarantees, but they trust their ability to adapt. Relationships are approached with sincerity. Commitments are honored carefully. This generation carries the depression within them, not as trauma alone, but as instruction. At the national level, the mood is one of readiness. Economic recovery has strengthened, though unevenly. Public institutions function with greater coordination. Financial systems are watched closely. Safeguards remain in place. These measures reflect a shared understanding that prevention matters as much as response. Public communication continues in a calm, steady tone. Information is presented clearly. Challenges are acknowledged. Plans are explained. This approach resonates with a public that has learned to value honesty over reassurance. As global events accelerate, this steadiness becomes essential. News from abroad carries urgency. Political tensions grow sharper. Military developments become more visible. Yet the public response remains measured. The depression trained people to absorb difficult information without immediate panic. Concern exists, but it is contained. People discuss developments thoughtfully. They weigh implications. They prepare without dramatizing. This emotional discipline, forged during years of hardship, now serves a new purpose. Communities reflect this readiness. Civic organizations organize training and planning. Local leaders coordinate with national efforts. There is a sense of alignment, of shared direction. People understand that participation matters, that collective effort strengthens everyone. Older generations observe these changes with mixed feelings. They recognize familiar patterns. They remember earlier conflicts. They speak carefully, offering perspective rather than alarm. Their memories, shaped by both war and depression, add depth to public understanding. Children sense seriousness without fear. They notice changes in conversation, in preparation, in tone. Yet they also feel stability at home. This balance allows them to remain curious and engaged rather than anxious. Culturally, the mood continues to evolve. Stories emphasize competence, duty, and moral clarity. Characters face challenges without spectacle. They persevere through effort rather than heroics. Audiences find comfort in these narratives, recognizing themselves within them. Music supports this emotional landscape. Songs are steady, reassuring. They do not urge escape, but offer companionship. Melodies feel familiar, grounding listeners in shared experience. Radio remains a constant presence. Voices speak calmly, guiding listeners through complexity. Families still gather to listen, though often quietly, absorbing information rather than reacting. The radio feels like a trusted companion rather than a source of distraction. In rural areas, life remains shaped by land and weather. Farms operate with improved practices. Conservation efforts continue. Planning is cautious. Farmers remain attentive to risk, but they feel better prepared to respond. Knowledge gained through hardship informs every decision. Urban centers feel active but restrained. Manufacturing expands. Transportation networks function efficiently. Employment opportunities widen. Yet growth remains measured. Infrastructure is maintained. Housing is developed carefully. Memory tempers ambition. Despite progress, awareness of inequality remains. Some communities continue to struggle. Disparities persist. These realities are no longer ignored as easily. The Depression made suffering visible. It created a moral awareness that continues to influence conversation and policy. Emotionally, people feel capable. Not invulnerable, but competent. They trust their ability to manage difficulty. They know how to cooperate. They know how to endure. This confidence is quiet, rooted in experience rather than optimism. Evenings reflect this steadiness. Families gather without urgency. Meals are shared slowly. Conversations flow naturally. Laughter arises easily. There is warmth without excess. Sleep comes more easily now. The body remembers stress, but it no longer lives within it constantly. Rest feels deeper, more restorative. Dreams are calmer, shaped by purpose rather than fear. Still, uncertainty remains. The future is not clear. Global tensions continue to grow. Economic recovery remains incomplete. Yet people do not retreat into anxiety. They stand where they are, grounded by memory, prepared by experience. The Depression taught that uncertainty does not require paralysis. It taught that systems can be rebuilt, that communities can organize, that individuals can adapt. These lessons now support people as they face new challenges. As we prepare to move gently into the next part, attention will turn toward how this readiness is tested more directly, how preparation meets action, and how the values shaped by the Great Depression guide decisions during another moment of historic change. For now, rest in this calm strength. The past has given tools. The present holds them carefully. And whatever comes next will be met not with panic, but with the steady, practiced resilience earned through years of patience, cooperation, and quiet resolve. Part 17. When readiness becomes action. As the final months of the decade arrive, the careful preparedness shaped by years of hardship begins to shift into motion. The Great Depression has taught patience, restraint, and endurance. Now, those lessons are called upon in a new way. What once felt like quiet readiness slowly becomes purposeful action, unfolding without spectacle but with unmistakable momentum. Daily life changes subtly at first. Schedules adjust. Conversations shift. Workplaces reorganize. There is an increased sense of coordination, of alignment toward shared goals. People notice it in small details. Longer hours at certain factories. New training sessions offered quietly. Supplies ordered with greater regularity. These changes are not framed as emergencies. They are framed as responsibility. Families feel the shift as well. Parents speak with clarity rather than worry. Children sense seriousness without fear. There is reassurance rooted in competence rather than promise. Households review routines. Clothing is mended. Shoes are kept in good repair. Items once saved only out of habit now feel purposeful. Meals are still simple, but they are nourishing. There is comfort in the familiar. The Depression taught that strength grows from consistency. This knowledge anchors households as new demands appear. Work takes on renewed significance. Employment expands in sectors tied to coordination and production. Skills developed during years of public works prove essential. Workers know how to follow plans, how to collaborate, how to adapt when conditions change. They understand discipline not as restriction, but as shared structure. There is pride in contributing. Not loud pride, not celebratory pride. Quiet pride. The pride of usefulness. Of knowing one's effort matters. For those returning to more intense labor, the transition feels manageable. The Depression prepared bodies and minds for effort. Long days are familiar. Fatigue is understood. Rest is valued and taken seriously. Communities reflect this collective shift. Civic organizations coordinate closely. Training sessions appear in town halls and schools. People attend willingly, understanding the importance of readiness. Participation feels natural rather than forced. Years of cooperation during hardship built trust that now supports coordination. There is little panic. The Depression taught that panic wastes energy. People move deliberately, relying on systems built through experience. When uncertainty arises, it is addressed through planning rather than speculation. Older generations offer perspective. They recognize how different this moment feels from previous crises. The Depression altered emotional response. It stripped away illusions and replaced them with competence. Elders share stories not to alarm, but to guide. Their memories add context, helping younger people understand the value of patience and preparation. Young adults respond with seriousness. They step into responsibility readily. Having grown up in scarcity, they understand commitment. They take instruction seriously. They value teamwork. Their sense of duty is grounded, not romantic. Education adapts quickly. Schools emphasize organization, cooperation, and practical knowledge. Lessons feel connected to real life. Students understand why structure matters. Why preparedness is not fear, but foresight. Culturally, the mood grows focused. Entertainment remains present, but it reflects resolve rather than escape. Stories emphasize responsibility, loyalty, and shared purpose. Audiences respond to narratives that honor effort without exaggeration. Music carries steadiness. Songs offer reassurance, grounding listeners in familiarity. They do not distract from seriousness. They accompany it. Radio remains central. Broadcasts explain changes clearly. Information is shared carefully. Voices remain calm and measured. Listeners trust this tone, shaped by years of honest communication. The radio feels like a steady companion guiding people through transition. In rural areas, participation takes different forms. Farms continue operating with caution. Families contribute through production, conservation, and local organization. Rural communities feel connected to broader efforts, even if their daily routines change less visibly. Urban centers feel the shift more directly. Factories increase output. Transportation networks grow busier. Coordination becomes more visible. Cities hum with purposeful activity, though without excess. Growth remains disciplined, shaped by memory. Emotionally, people feel steady. There is concern, certainly. Awareness of risk. But fear does not dominate. The Depression taught that fear can coexist with action. That uncertainty does not eliminate agency. This emotional balance becomes a defining strength. People do not deny difficulty. They acknowledge it and move forward anyway. Evenings reflect this tone. Families gather with intention. Conversations are thoughtful. Plans are discussed openly. There is reassurance in shared understanding. Laughter still appears, gentle and grounding. Sleep comes more easily than it once did. The body recognizes purposeful fatigue. Rest feels deserved. Dreams are shaped by movement rather than stagnation. The Great Depression's influence is unmistakable here. It trained people to live with less, to cooperate, to trust structure, to value preparation. These lessons now support action rather than survival alone. What once felt like endurance becomes capacity. As we prepare to move gently into the next part, attention will turn toward how sustained effort reshapes identity, how collective action reinforces shared values, and how the long shadow of the Depression continues to guide decisions even as history accelerates. For now, rest in this moment when readiness becomes motion. The years of hardship were not wasted. They forged steadiness. And that steadiness now carries people forward, calm, capable, and awake to the demands of a changing world. Part 18. Endurance becomes identity. By the time the nation moves fully into the final stretch of the decade, something fundamental has changed at a deeper level than policy or production. The Great Depression has moved beyond being a chapter of hardship and has become part of who people are. Endurance is no longer something practiced only in moments of crisis. It has settled into identity, shaping how individuals see themselves and how they relate to one another. Daily life carries this imprint quietly. People move with assurance born not of ease, but of familiarity with difficulty. They know how to adjust when plans change. They know how to conserve energy, how to pace themselves, how to rest when needed and work when called upon. These skills feel ordinary now, almost invisible, yet they form the foundation of stability. In homes, this endurance shows itself in small ways. Cupboards are stocked thoughtfully. Tools are kept in working order. Clothing is folded carefully, mended when worn. There is comfort in knowing where things are, in being able to respond quickly to need. Disorder feels unsettling. Organization feels like peace. Families communicate with clarity. Conversations are direct but gentle. Problems are addressed without drama. Decisions are discussed openly, even with children, who have grown accustomed to being included in practical realities. This transparency builds trust and emotional resilience. Children raised in this environment grow up grounded. They understand that life includes effort. That challenges do not signal failure. That asking for help is not weakness. These lessons shape confidence that does not rely on circumstance alone. Workplaces reflect the same maturity. Teams function with efficiency and mutual respect. People understand their roles. Cooperation feels natural. Conflict, when it arises, is approached with pragmatism rather than ego. The Depression stripped away illusions of independence and replaced them with appreciation for interdependence. This awareness strengthens collective effort. People no longer assume that someone else will solve problems for them. They take initiative where they can. They follow plans where coordination is required. This balance between autonomy and cooperation feels intuitive now. Communities operate with quiet competence. Organizations formed during the worst years continue to function smoothly. Leadership is practical rather than performative. Decisions are made with attention to consequence. There is little appetite for spectacle. What matters is effectiveness. Older generations observe this with a sense of completion. They remember the early years of collapse, the confusion, the fear, the waiting. Seeing endurance transformed into capability brings reassurance. The suffering was not meaningless. It taught something lasting. They share this perspective gently. Stories are told without bitterness. Memories are offered as guidance rather than warning. Younger people listen with respect, absorbing context that deepens understanding. Young adults step forward confidently. They are not reckless. They are not naive. Their confidence comes from knowing they have survived uncertainty before, even if they were young at the time. They trust themselves to adapt. This trust allows them to act decisively without panic. Education reinforces this mindset. Learning emphasizes problem solving, cooperation, and responsibility. Knowledge is valued not as abstraction, but as tool. Students understand why structure matters. Why discipline supports freedom rather than restricting it. Culturally, this period carries a tone of steadiness. Stories celebrate perseverance more than victory. Characters succeed by enduring, by showing up consistently, by supporting others. Audiences connect deeply with these themes because they recognize themselves within them. Music remains present as companion rather than escape. Songs offer reassurance through familiarity. Melodies are grounding. Lyrics speak of loyalty, patience, and quiet hope. These songs feel like shared breath rather than performance. Radio continues to anchor daily life. Voices speak calmly, explaining developments, offering context. The public has grown accustomed to measured communication. Sensationalism feels unnecessary. Trust rests on consistency and honesty. In rural areas, endurance feels deeply familiar. Farmers continue to adapt to weather, land, and market conditions. Conservation practices remain in place. Planning is careful. There is respect for limits. The land is approached as partner rather than resource alone. Urban centers hum steadily. Production continues. Transportation systems function smoothly. Cities feel purposeful without excess. Growth is managed rather than chased. Memory tempers ambition. Despite stability, awareness of vulnerability remains. People do not forget how quickly conditions can change. This memory does not produce fear. It produces attentiveness. Early signs of trouble are noticed. Plans are adjusted promptly. Flexibility feels natural. Emotionally, there is calm strength. Not the absence of worry, but the presence of confidence in response. People trust their ability to endure without losing themselves. This trust allows space for warmth, humor, and connection. Evenings reflect this emotional balance. Homes are quiet but alive. Meals are shared unhurriedly. Conversations wander comfortably. There is space for reflection and laughter. Life feels full without being crowded. Sleep arrives gently. The body recognizes familiar rhythms. Fatigue feels purposeful. Rest feels restorative. Dreams are not shaped by fear, but by movement and continuity. The Great Depression's influence is unmistakable here. It reshaped values permanently. It taught patience. It taught cooperation. It taught humility. These lessons are no longer consciously recalled every day, but they guide instinctively. Endurance has become identity. People no longer think of themselves as surviving the depression. They think of themselves as capable because of it. This distinction matters deeply. It transforms hardship into foundation rather than scar. As we prepare to move gently toward the next part, attention will turn toward how this identity carries forward into the years beyond the depression, how memory and endurance influence the transition into a new historical chapter, and how the quiet strength built here continues to shape lives long after circumstances change. For now, rest in this moment of embodied resilience. The struggle has not been erased, but it has been integrated. What once demanded endurance has become strength carried naturally, shaping a society that knows how to stand steady, together, even as the world continues to change. Part 19. Looking back without turning away. As the Great Depression recedes further into memory, it does not fade in the way ordinary events do. It does not blur or soften entirely. Instead, it settles into perspective, becoming something people can look back on without being pulled under by it. The pain remains remembered, but it is no longer overwhelming. What replaces it is understanding. Life, by now, feels fuller. Not easier in every sense, but more coherent. Systems function. Work continues. Communities move with shared rhythm. The uncertainty that once dominated daily thought has quieted into background awareness, like distant weather rather than immediate threat. People notice this change most clearly in themselves. They realize that they are no longer bracing constantly. Their shoulders sit lower. Their breathing feels deeper. Decisions are made without the same tightness in the chest. There is room for reflection now, room to consider what has been lived through and what it has meant. Conversations begin to include the depression more openly. Not as complaint, not as fear, but as story. Families speak of those years at tables where food is now reliable. Parents tell children how meals were once stretched, how shoes were patched, how neighbors shared what little they had. These stories are not meant to frighten. They are meant to explain. They explain habits. Why food is not wasted. Why savings matter. Why generosity is instinctive. Why people notice when someone is struggling. The depression becomes context, a quiet explanation for the way things are done. Children listen carefully. They grow up understanding that comfort has history. That stability was earned. That what feels normal once required effort and cooperation. These lessons root gratitude in knowledge rather than abstraction. For older generations, this period offers a kind of emotional release. They no longer feel defined by loss alone. They can acknowledge grief without being consumed by it. They can see the arc of their lives more clearly, understanding how endurance shaped who they became. Many recognize their own strength with surprise. They had survived without knowing they were strong. They had adapted without planning to become resilient. Looking back, they see themselves differently, with respect rather than exhaustion. Work reflects this maturity. People approach tasks with confidence built through experience. They know how to manage difficulty. They trust systems because they help build them. There is pride in competence, not loud or self-important, but steady and grounded. Relationships deepen through shared memory. Those who lived through the worst years together carry a quiet bond. They understand one another without explanation. A glance, a pause, a shared silence can convey more than words. This shared history fosters patience and empathy. Even disagreements feel different now. They are less likely to fracture relationships. People know that survival required cooperation. That knowledge tempers conflict. Arguments are approached with perspective, informed by memory of what truly matters. Communities reflect this stability. Public spaces feel cared for. Infrastructure built during earlier recovery is maintained attentively. Neighborhoods function with mutual awareness. People greet one another. They notice absence. They offer help naturally. Civic participation remains strong. People vote. They attend meetings. They follow news carefully. Not out of fear, but out of responsibility. The Depression taught that disengagement carries cost. Participation feels necessary rather than optional. Nationally, identity has shifted. The belief in endless ease has been replaced by belief in adaptability. The illusion of permanence has given way to appreciation for maintenance. Progress is understood as something that must be tended, protected, adjusted. This understanding influences leadership. Policies emphasize balance. Institutions are monitored. Safeguards are maintained. There is recognition that prosperity without oversight invites collapse. These ideas, once debated, are now widely accepted. Culturally, reflection becomes prominent. Stories look backward with honesty and forward with restraint. There is respect for ordinary lives shaped by extraordinary circumstances. Heroes are defined not by triumph alone, but by endurance and care. Music carries nostalgia gently. Songs recall hardship without dwelling in sorrow. They honor perseverance. They remind listeners of shared journey. These melodies feel comforting rather than heavy, like familiar footsteps returning home. Radio continues to accompany daily life. Though new concerns fill the airwaves, the tone remains grounded. Voices speak with calm authority. Information is contextualized. People trust consistency over drama, a preference shaped during years when clarity mattered deeply. In rural areas, memory runs especially deep. Land remembers hardship as surely as people do. Fields once stripped by wind are now tended carefully. Farmers speak of past droughts not as distant history, but as guidance. They plan with humility, respecting limits learned through loss. Urban centers carry memory differently. Cities remember through neighborhoods, through buildings repurposed, through infrastructure born of recovery. These spaces hold stories of waiting lines, shared meals, public labor. Though daily life has changed, the imprint remains. Emotionally, people feel anchored. They know where they have been. They understand why they value what they value. This clarity reduces anxiety about the future. Uncertainty no longer feels like unknown territory. It feels familiar, manageable. There is also forgiveness present. Forgiveness of institutions that failed once they were repaired. Forgiveness of leaders who misjudged. Forgiveness of oneself for fear felt, for choices made under pressure. This forgiveness is not forgetfulness. It is release. Letting go does not mean erasing memory. It means allowing memory to inform rather than dominate. Evenings reflect this peace. Homes feel settled. Conversations unfold without urgency. There is space for reflection and quiet laughter. People enjoy the present without constantly scanning for threat. Sleep comes easily. The mind no longer rehearses survival scenarios endlessly. Dreams are gentler. The body rests more deeply, no longer holding tension as default. The Great Depression has become something people carry with composure. Not as an open wound. Not as a defining fear. But as a chapter that shaped wisdom. This wisdom shows itself in patience, in generosity, in caution balanced with hope. It guides decisions quietly, without announcement. As the nation stands further removed from the years of deepest hardship, the Depression becomes a reference point rather than a shadow. It offers orientation, perspective, humility. As we prepare to move gently into the final part, attention will turn toward closure. Not an ending that seals history away, but a quiet settling. A reflection on how the Great Depression continues to live within habits, values, and choices long after it ceased to dominate daily life. For now, rest in this moment of remembrance without pain. The past has been faced. It has been integrated. And in that integration lies calm understanding, allowing life to move forward not in denial, but in quiet awareness of how much has been endured and how much strength was found along the way. Part 20. What remains? As the Great Depression settles fully into the past, it does not close like a door or fade like a distant echo. It remains, quietly and persistently, in the shape of lives lived afterward. Not as fear, not as sorrow, but as understanding. What remains is not the hardship itself, but the knowledge it carved into everyday existence. Life, now, feels steady. Not perfect, not immune to difficulty, but grounded. The sharp edges of survival have softened into habits of care. People move through their days with an awareness that once felt heavy but now feels natural. They plan. They prepare. They notice one another. These things no longer feel like responses to crisis. They feel like the proper way to live. The Depression taught patience. That lesson lives on in small pauses. In waiting before spending. In listening before speaking. In choosing durability over novelty. People no longer rush toward certainty. They understand that time reveals what urgency cannot. It taught humility. Success is not assumed to be permanent. Comfort is appreciated without arrogance. When things go well, there is gratitude rather than excess. When things falter, there is adjustment rather than despair. This humility keeps balance intact. It taught cooperation. People remember what it meant to rely on one another. That memory did not dissolve when conditions improved. It settled into instinct. Help is offered more easily. Pride no longer blocks compassion. Community feels necessary rather than optional. These lessons shape daily life quietly. In kitchens, food is prepared with intention. In homes, objects are cared for rather than replaced thoughtlessly. In neighborhoods, people notice absence and presence. They greet one another. They ask questions. They check in. Children raised in this world inherit these values without being burdened by fear. They learn thrift without anxiety, responsibility without dread, gratitude without scarcity. They grow up knowing that stability exists, but it is built, not guaranteed. This knowledge makes them careful, not fearful. Education carries forward these truths. Learning emphasizes application and understanding rather than abstraction alone. Young people are encouraged to think critically, to cooperate, to plan. They are taught not only how to succeed, but how to endure when success is interrupted. Work carries meaning beyond income. People value usefulness. They take pride in reliability. They respect labor because they know what its absence once meant. Work is not romanticized, but it is honored. Contribution feels essential. Relationships deepen through shared perspective. Those who lived through the Depression together carry an unspoken understanding. Even those born afterward inherit that awareness through stories, habits, and tone. There is less impatience, less entitlement, more forgiveness. Disagreements occur, as they always do, but they are tempered by memory. People know what true crisis looks like. They know what matters when everything else is stripped away. This knowledge anchors conversation, preventing conflict from becoming rupture. National identity, too, bears this imprint. The idea of endless growth has been replaced by appreciation for sustainability. Systems are monitored. Safeguards are valued. Maintenance is respected as much as innovation. Progress is no longer assumed to be self-sustaining. Leadership is expected to be competent rather than charismatic alone. Clear communication matters. Preparation matters. Accountability matters. These expectations were forged in hardship and carried forward with intention. Culturally, reflection remains present. Stories honor ordinary lives shaped by extraordinary circumstances. Triumph is measured quietly. Endurance is recognized as strength. Art does not shy away from difficulty, but it does not glorify suffering either. It acknowledges it, integrates it, and moves on. Music holds memory gently. Songs recall hardship without reopening wounds. They carry familiarity, grounding listeners in shared experience. They feel like companionship rather than escape. Even the way people rest has changed. Sleep comes more easily when survival no longer dominates thought. The body remembers hunger, cold, and fear, but it does not relive them constantly. Rest becomes restorative rather than vigilant. The depression did not disappear. It transformed. It became a teacher rather than a threat. People no longer live as though catastrophe is imminent, but they also do not live as though it is impossible. This balance creates calm. It allows for joy without recklessness, caution without paralysis. Looking back, there is no desire to relive those years. But there is respect for what they produced. They produced resilience, perspective, care. They revealed weakness in systems and strength in people. They exposed inequality and inspired reform. They stripped away illusion and replaced it with understanding. What remains is not the memory of empty shelves or long lines, but the reflex to share. Not the sound of silence in factories, but the knowledge that work connects people to dignity. Not the fear of tomorrow, but the awareness that tomorrow can be met. In quiet moments, people still think of those years. They think of parents and grandparents who endured without complaint, of neighbors who shared without record, of communities that held together when nothing else seemed reliable. These thoughts do not bring sadness. They bring grounding. They remind people who they are and why they live the way they do. The Great Depression did not end with a single moment or declaration. It ended gradually, unevenly, differently for everyone. But its influence never truly ended at all. It settled into values, into habits, into instincts, into the quiet understanding that life is not guaranteed to be easy, but it can be meaningful, cooperative, and steady. As we come to the close of this long story, there is no dramatic resolution to announce. No sharp line between then and now. Instead, there is continuity. The past flows into the present, shaping it gently. And the present carries forward what was learned, not loudly, not ceremoniously, but faithfully. For now, let the story rest. Let the long years soften into memory. Let the lessons remain without weight. The Great Depression has been endured, understood, and carried forward. What remains is a quieter strength, a steadiness born of patience, a society shaped not only by what it lost, but by what it learned to hold on to. And in that holding, there is calm. There is continuity. There is rest. As this long story settles into quiet, there is no need to hurry away from it. The years we have moved through tonight were heavy, slow, and demanding, yet they were also patient teachers. They showed what happens when certainty falls away and people are asked to rely on one another, on routine, on small acts of care repeated day after day. They showed that endurance does not always look dramatic. Often, it looks like waking up again, making do, and choosing steadiness over despair. The Great Depression did not end cleanly or all at once. It loosened its hold gradually, unevenly, quietly. In many ways, it never fully left. It remained in habits, in caution, in generosity, in the way people learned to notice one another. And perhaps that is why its legacy feels less like a scar and more like a foundation. What mattered most in those years was not wealth regained or markets corrected, but balance restored. A balance between hope and realism, between independence and cooperation, between ambition and care. Those who lived through it learned that strength does not always mean pushing forward. Sometimes it means standing still long enough to breathe, to adjust, to rebuild carefully. As this story comes to rest, there is no lesson to memorize, no conclusion to hold tightly. Only a sense of calm understanding. The knowledge that even in long seasons of uncertainty, life continues. Meals are shared. Children grow. Neighbors help. Systems falter and are repaired. And people adapt, often more gently than expected. If the weight of the day has followed along until now, it can be set down here. Let the noise of effort soften. Let the memory of endurance become quiet reassurance rather than strain. The past has been acknowledged. Its lessons are carried without urgency. There is nothing left to solve tonight. In the stillness that remains, there is space for rest. Breath slows. Thoughts loosen. The long arc of history fades into a calm background, no longer demanding attention. What remains is steadiness. A sense that difficult chapters can be survived, understood, and folded gently into the fabric of life. You are safe to drift now. The story has been told. The years have passed. The lessons remain light and settled. Rest comes easily here, in the quiet after understanding. And nothing more is required. Background historian out.